Hi, everyone. This is Jackie Cooper, and I am doing the keynote recording today with a very special guest for our global summit. We have the honor today of being in the presence of the president of the Free Republic of Liberland. And we are very excited to have him here because we are all about featuring sandboxes from around the world. At our last global summit, we had the interview with the premier of Bermuda. And today we are featuring another sandbox nation. And so we are going to be talking with him about what is going on in this community and why they are innovators within the blockchain space. And as our global summits are going to be featuring communities from around the world, we are very excited to have the president of the Free Republic of Liberland, Beat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Jackie. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And I'm doing even better than usually because we just launched the first decentralized exchange on top of our blockchain, which means that all the assets inside of our ecosystems are fully interchangeable. So that also means that Liberland Merit has been actually introduced on exchanges as of today, which is pretty exciting because until now we only had Liberland dollar trading on Liberland exchanges, and now through Liberland dollar anybody can actually buy any other assets that is inside of Liberland.
That is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I mean, I first, before we get into the history of Liberland, for those that are watching our global summit, they are seeing the vision behind you with your flags and the symbols. Can you explain to us a little bit about what it means? Because this really is the vision of the community as well. So what are we looking at behind you?
Well, in 2015, we actually started a regular country. The country is located 5 kilometers away from here, where I'm sitting at Arc Village. But I'm very excited because today there is 20 workers building something after the winter and after a lot of good stories with Croatians last autumn. Things are again turning into the construction direction, and a lot of things are happening these days. So I just received a very nice news from Liberland TV, very recent post that the first building is being erected tomorrow. So again, a lot of exciting things. And Liberland is a startup country. It was based on libertarian ideas in 2015 on a territory between Croatia and Serbia, on a heart-shaped territory, which is exactly 7 square kilometers big. So it means we are 3 times bigger than Monaco or 10 times bigger than Vatican. We're still the third smallest country in the world, but we've got the most powerful ideas, and I think also most coolest or most sexiest blockchain solution for the governance of the country in one package. I think an unbeatable combination of things.
So I see behind you the tree and the bird and the sun. What are those represent?
The tree is there for prosperity. It's the rowan tree. The bird is there for the liberty that Liberland is bringing. The water is the Danube River, which is the biggest river in Europe, which one of the biggest rivers in Europe, which is floating on the side of our territory. And we have also very beautiful sandy island with the 1 kilometer long sandy beach on this Danube River. So that's another thing. And then we've got yellow and black, and they signify, yellow signifies the free markets, and black signifies limited or almost non-existent government.
So today we're going to be talking about the vision. And can you detail, Liberland's vision for creating a digital economy, especially the use for, cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, since we're all about sandboxes? How, what's your vision for the future of the community?
Well, we're almost in the space of fulfilling that vision fully, which is kind of exciting. And then we were just let it grow. Our vision was to build the most modern nation state on the planet, removing the necessity to have maybe 80-90% of bureaucrats that there in normal country, In our land register, nobody needs to sign anything. There needs to be no human element. The same thing with our car register. Our court system doesn't need any clerks. Everything is basically done automatically. Just the judges are humans, and all the transactions are on blockchain. All the important information are on our blockchain. Our voting doesn't need to be checked by anybody because it's all on blockchain again, completely transparent system based on the public and private key infrastructure. Nobody needs to audit our accounting because everything is completely transparent and online as we are doing it. So there are all these cool innovations where Liberland really wants to be very limited government, only taking care of security, justice, and diplomacy, and leaving the rest to private sector. Even these three things, we are able to innovate so much that we can almost remove the human element out of it, making it the most hyper efficient nation state on the planet. And we already have a couple countries that are interested in what we're building. I actually just came from Argentina, where I believe Javier Milei, who is our long-term supporter, will see the benefits of having such a platform for Argentina itself at some point. And we are literally kind of a testing ground before it can be implemented to bigger countries. And the cool thing on top of everything that we're building is that we only have voluntary tax system, and these taxes, when you pay them, you are actually becoming the shareholder of the country. So we fixed that, I would say, biggest stain on the governance of nation state, that people were paying taxes. They were paying very high taxes and nobody even told them thank you. And instead of telling people thank you, and we also tell them thank you, but on top of telling them thank you, we actually make them shareholders of the very country they are living in. And I think that's the healthy relationship between the state and its citizens. Today, we also started a school. So when they're coming with bigger families and with the kids, they can put the kids to first liberal and primary school, which is kind of exciting. And we have a really good services for people. There is very good internet. We actually have more than 20 diaspora villages all around the world. You can check them on our website. So you don't have to live in Liberland in order to enjoy being part of the community. And in Croatia, there is more of a logistic base, but it's exciting because like 18 new people arrived today to the Liber base, which is only 5 kilometers away from Liberland, but on the Croatian side of the river. And from there, we settle Liberland, we make the excursions. And from there, we are preparing the physical boots on the ground. And in Liberland itself, there is quite a lot of partnerships. Right now, I would say the most exciting one is with the network state.io, which is one of those bigger network states that were created in the recent times, and they are creating communities as well based on very similar ideas like Liberland. But Liberland was simply a couple of years before that whole network state movement started. But I'm excited that we are able to make special deals with both serious orders, like humanitarian orders, as well as with network states, and we're able to grant them partial sovereignty on the territory of Liberland, kind of a small embassies or even larger places if they become more involved with Liberland. So that's one thing. And then we have anniversary.liberland.org, which is happening on 13th of April mainly. And that's a major conference where we are bringing different partners from different industries on board. Also, our citizens are coming together to see Liberland. So it's a really exciting time to come down to Liberland physically, because it starts at Arc Village with a bigger conference in a air-conditioned space with a big restaurant. And then we are moving 5 kilometers away to Liberland to be a little bit more adventurous in the nature, and hopefully there will be already a small restaurant as well in a month and a half. But why is it exciting? Because all important people that are part of our community, almost all, are coming, and a lot of exciting potential partners are going to speak there as well.
I have two more questions, and then we're going to head into our global summit. The next question I have is similar to the question that I asked our premier. You had talked about the school, and I'm all about the education for our youth. What do you think that we need to be thinking about to bring our youth forward in understanding more about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and just the digital community, and how are you doing that within your community?
Well, first of all, the kids are being rewarded with liberal and merits and liberal and dollars, so they're active users of the ecosystem. And secondly, of course, we teach them how the system of governance works in Liberland, how the constitution has been structured, how the DAO that is behind all of that works. And that was something which I also couldn't manage to, even were paying this expensive private school in Czech Republic. It was difficult to even explain them what Bitcoin is. And I was then I gave up and I said, okay, we have to actually start a school and educate the kids that we want to see fit. So that's why we did it. And we found out that Ron Paul, our esteemed citizen, has actually prepared a curriculum for children. So we're working with that particular curriculum and partnership with other schools from United States that are into unschooling and other alternative study systems, which we want to test and see which one is the most efficient. But I'm very personally, I'm very much into learning by playing or learning by doing, which are my kind of personal mottos and main drivers why I actually started this.
At this global summit, we have three panels. We have panels that are going to be speaking about real world assets. We're going to be talking about other legal and regulatory compliance issues that are happening within the world. And finally, how blockchain is impacting in a good way change within the legacy financial systems and DeFi and economic zones. So do you have any insights for those? We have over 22 individuals who are going to be talking on these different subjects. But for those that are listening, where do you see that we might need to be thinking about going within our world to help with the innovation and also to support those that are unbanked and those that might have certain needs? What last minute insights do you have that maybe we can share with those that are listening?
Well, my younger son was unbanked until today. Now he's got a phone and he's got an edge wallet where he can have his liberal and dollars and liberal and merits. So he's banked, and I know that that's kind of sounds funny, but yes, now he has the same capacity as anybody else. Nobody asked him for his ID while he was opening that wallet. So we're really in this exciting age of self-sovereignty on many different levels. And I really believe this kind of new age where you really kind of don't need nation states for some things is a great opportunity to start a nation state of people that understand it and make a very influential and very powerful diplomatic lobbying group, which we are into with Liberland. So I would like to again invite you either to come very fast for the end of the winter, because we have 1 week citizenship program. So if you help for 1 week before the end of March, you get the citizenship. I understand actually we'll have to cut this out because this event is happening after end of March. But on the other hand, I would love to have you on 13th of April, which I think is a great opportunity again to meet the people from our community. And then we almost every weekend have some cultural or sports event happening. So there'll be two major festivals. We have uh, a major conference in September called Anarchopulco that we are organizing now. So we will have a marathon in Liberland and kayak competition and MMA tournament. So every single weekend that you can potentially come, it will be a lot of fun, and you shouldn't miss the country creation in the process.
I agree. I agree. We look forward to that. And for those that are listening to our keynote, definitely, I would say explore the website and to actually take advantage of all this. I want to thank you for being our keynote, and I'm going to turn this over now to my co-founder and some of the others that are going to be leading the way with myself during the summit. So let's now turn to the first panel, and thank you so much for being on. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you so much. All
Thank
right,
you very much.
guys, go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure and an honor to speak at your platform. And again, I hope to have you as a citizen or e-resident soon.
Looking forward. Panel one, let's go on to you. Bye. Hi, everyone. This is Jackie Cooper, the CEO of the Blockchain Legal Institute, and we want to welcome you to our second Blockchain Legal Summit, which will always be happening in March. I would like to welcome my co-founder, Matt Rogers. How are you doing today, Matt?
A place like Liberland exists. I want to go. Let's get citizenship. Let's let's raise families there where the children can interact with a sovereign currency, and be individuals that are empowered, where they're autonomous. Amazing things that we heard there. I've been aware of Liberland for a while, and definitely a good refresher, and great to see that a community like that is actually making it happen. So. And then tell us a little bit about the panel. Let's get into it. We got people waiting. So let's talk about the panel and introduce everybody.
We do. We have three panels today. The first panel will be talking about real world assets. The second panel is going to be talking about blockchain law and some of the compliance issues that we're all hearing about in the news. And then the third panel will also be about DeFi finance and how blockchain is influencing our current markets. So we have individuals who are speaking from Kenya to South America to Sweden, all over the world. So we definitely have an exciting group of experts who are going to be speaking. And so we were going to start welcoming on our first panel. And I know that my background, for those that might not know, is law and education. And I am also the author of the Bitcoin Cinderella books. Matt, you might want to share a little bit about your background as well, because again, we do come from different backgrounds, but the reason why these summits are so successful is that we are bringing a diverse group of thinkers to the panels to kind of share their thoughts. So Matt, why don't you share your background as well?
Sure. I'm on the technology side of things usually. Also do a lot of project management. I'm a co-founder of Blockchain Legal Institute with Jackie, which is one of my favorite hustles to run. Building decentralized applications, definitely wanting to stay on the cutting edge of technology. Just like everyone in the startup world, we want to make the world a better place, and that's often cliched, but we're here chipping away at it. And I want to mention one thing just to get it out of the way before we get started. Nothing that you hear on the show is legal advice. Nothing that you hear on the show is financial advice. We have some wonderful, lawyers in the network, including financial partners like Sarson Funds, that if you have questions about financial advice or, questions about legal things that you're dealing with, we'll point you in the right direction. But this is definitely for education purposes.
Very much so. Thank you for sharing those disclaimers. We definitely have to put those in as always. So with our first panel, we will have our moderator be Dr. Chris Smithmeyer, and he is actually the vice president of international affairs, Brave Online Conflict Management. He's also the co-founder of the Black Wallet Limited. I know he's going to share a little bit more about his background. We also have a variety of speakers, from Alejandro Maggiano, who is the founder of the International Law Tech Consortium, and he's also heavily involved with the Government Blockchain Association, both in South America as well as other countries. We also have Enrique Aznar, who's the co-founder of the Real Fund, which is involved with asset tokenization. And again, each of our speakers will be sharing a little bit more about their background as well. We have Scott Page, who is both a well-known musician, but also a technologist and an entrepreneur. And he's been involved in the NFT space, but he's also the co-founder of Loot 8, which is a decentralized experience platform. And he has been speaking around the world. We also have Deal Blackier, who's the Muse Frame Art CEO and founder of an international
online museum galleries and art involved with Art Basel and the Louvre and a lot of other digital assets. We also have Liwao Shahabyab, who's the founder and CEO of Pulsify Innovation Consultants. And he's a Web3 and AI consultant, and he has been involved with finance and banking. And his experience goes back to 2016, and it's very diverse. And he'll also be sharing a little bit more about his background. And then we have Jack Nicosizan, and I apologize. My mouth is not always working properly. He's the CEO of RZ, and that he's revolutionizing digital finance and again, tokenization of real world assets. And he is also a very creative entrepreneur. So I think that we have everyone here that on our panel, and Dr. Smithmeyer, welcome, and everyone else, welcome. As you are speaking about your questions, feel free to expand, and share a little bit more. We do have the luxury of time on all these panels, so that way we definitely want to have a diverse conversation. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Smithmeyer.
Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Dr. Chris Smithmeyer, and I'm honored to be here today to help out with this legal summit. The more information we get out here about the blockchain industry, the better it is, because the greatest challenge we have right now is lack of knowledge in the field, because so many people want to learn about it, and there's so much out there that they can learn. And we have an amazing panel today of people that others should be going to for information, because these guys know their stuff. And we're going to jump right into this to get some questions going, and we're going to start with Alex. So, Alex, how can international regulators work together to overcome the obstacles to a unified regulatory framework for real-world assets on the blockchain? And how can we get involved to help with that?
Well, we've been working a lot, and I think what we started talking about in GBA, it was that there's a huge differences among all the countries, and maybe the most advanced are the ones from Europe, because they have NICA and all that laws. So we said that we have to develop something new. We started partnering with Enrique Aznar, which is the GBA head of Spain, and we gather all the teams that we have throughout the region in Iberoamerica. And we have to the definition of a strategy that we all just complain about why things have been done that way, but nobody understands that that's because the laws are not correctly defined, or were defined for past things and things that were not longer moving. And now we have to define new types of applying the law and the laws. And the only ways that they can do that is that they need to understand how things are being working with the Web3. So we decided to create the international consortium, LOTEC consortium, and we partnered first with Enrique, and then we include in the group Galter, which is the Global Academy of LOTEC Education and Research from India. They have more than 150 attorneys specialized on new technologies. And then we also invite the BLI to be part of, because the main idea is that we have to train or let's upskill and reskill the doers of the laws, which are the attorneys, the judges, and the doctors in law. Because while they don't understand what blockchain is and how it works, then they cannot define if we really require new laws. We complain about everything, every aspect of blockchain solutions, from light titling to cryptocurrencies to whatever you mentioned, and there's no excuse that we can just tell them, can you just rule about this or about that, because they don't know what blockchain is. So the main focus that we have is that we are going to develop by group, we have by country, like a set of lawyers and attorneys we can train on blockchain for them. And the first phase is to develop with Enrique a blockchain for attorneys course or seminars, so that we can start explaining them how blockchain works. And our main scope is to let them in the blockchain knowledge in their back of their minds. So when they face a new problem, they can say, "Oh, what if I just use something that I have learned about blockchain?" And then they can start applying it to real things, because there are so many things that I have to rule about, and we don't know how it's going to be the effect until we just start training them or educating them. We can just be more integrated. And the main idea is that if we can just develop new laws and maybe even constitutions, or maybe that they can look alike or be compared, we can start then talking about how can we just interact by country. So the main idea is that we can have in this case Iberoamerica just be together with the same or look-alike laws, so that everything can just shift from one place to another in a transparent and clear way, complying with all the laws, the requirements of taxes and all those things. That we are just, for example, there are countries like in Mexico, it's forbidden for you to acquire legally cryptocurrency, and if so, you have to accuse yourself and say to our IRS, the equivalent of IRS, I bought this, and this is the total amount of benefit that I have. So they are going to send you a taxing bracket that you have to pay. But in this time, in this until this time gets done, if the bank just knows that or acknowledges that you're just doing using a cryptocurrency, they can block your accounts, and they will report it to the audit and even to the judges. So you're just going to be treated as a criminal, because they say it's money laundering. So that's when we have to train and educate the lawyers and the authorities to know exactly how to deal with these topics. Until then, we're going to be prosecuted because we're just doing things with something that they say that they don't understand, even though they understand it very clearly.
You're bringing up a very good point in terms of how we need to navigate in different parts of the world. So we definitely appreciate that. Um, Dr. Smithmeyer, what is the next question that you would like?
Jack, we'll throw the next question over to you. You saw the need to problem solve within the blockchain community. How does ARYZE's Reforge tool simplify the process and reduce the cost of exchanging traditional euro and dollar-backed stablecoins for businesses and consumers? And in what way does doing this on-chain direct conversion work with various forms of digital cash, including EUSD, eGBP, and eEuro, not only to enhance liquidity, but address the new areas of need within the newly launched Web3 platform, specifically MAMA, through the integration of stablecoins?
In that, there are many words that listeners probably have not heard before, like MAMA and Reforge and other expressions. So to keep it simple, we build stablecoins. We call these stablecoins digital cash because our goal in Arise has been to tokenize the kind of realest of real world assets, actual money. I will not go in yet into a rant about why money in the bank is not real money or the credit security of bank deposits or the FDIC insurance, which is a beast in itself. That I will not talk about. I will talk about money in a different way. With digital cash, we believe that we need to stop moving money around. We need to keep money still, and then we can move IOUs around, kind of like banks do. But let us move these IOUs around using smarter technology than just building another silo or another kind of online bank with our own servers. Let's build something upon a common denominator which different organizations and nations can trust, hence blockchain. So Arise, we have an e-euro, an e-dollar, and an e-pound. all of our stable coins are backed on an asset-backed model where assets are only short-term government bonds. I do like the idea of having different types of assets behind stablecoins, but right now the mission is to digitize cash, and for better or for worse, Caesar's face is on the coin. So with that, we have decided to digitize the biggest currencies, but we have built an engine which can tokenize any form of fiat currency. We could have a Filipino pesos, an e-pesos, or an e-Mexican peso, or e-Danish krona. Technologically speaking, it would not take a lot for us to deploy such an asset. Reforge is the name of a function which is built into our stablecoins, which essentially makes Forex a function. Today, if a tether euro must be traded to a tether dollar or a circle euro to a circle dollar, you're still dependent on exchanges or liquidity pools, and often in other than dollar-backed stablecoins, liquidity is very slim, resulting in high slippage. And look, even if there were no slippage, you don't know who you're trading with. If one institution makes a swap, $1 million swap into euros on a DEX like Uniswap, you don't really know whose liquidity you're playing around with. It's not clean money, so to speak. And for a lot of institutions, doing, say, intra-bank settlements using these methods is kind of iffy because you're using money or liquidity which is not familiar to you. With Arise and with digital cash, you burn and mint, and then you burn and then you mint, and then you burn and then you mint. Essentially, you come in with eEuro, and using the APIs or using what we call Reforge, you can burn your asset, removing it entirely from circulation. And using the proof of burn and on-chain prices that we get from Chainlink, so you can trust the sources of the FX prices which you are quoted, that lets you convert between eEuro to eDollar to ePound back to eEuro. So you are not bound by the liquidity restraints which other stablecoins often face. And an extension of that, I came into crypto via Bitcoin in 2013. I got some Bitcoins that were hacked from Mt. Gox. Lesson learned, I guess. And I had this mantra saying, look, enough with the smart money. Everybody wants to create smart money or smart this. Let's just make dumb money smart instead. I don't want to dictate if you want to use euro or Brazilian reais or Mexican peso. Boo-boo, you do you. But let's just make dumb money smart so that the people that actually interact with fiat can do it in a much more efficient way. We are not moving money around. We are keeping money still. And we're using blockchain technology to transfer ownership of this money that we keep still. And where do we keep it? We keep it with the only guys who can print more money, with the central banks. Because you cannot have a stable coin, which is just a bank deposit, not protected by anything. So Arise, we believe that it needs to be asset-backed in assets that are really short-term and has government guarantee. That is the essence of what we are trying to do. We're trying to tokenize the realest of real world assets, which is cash. That's kind of the mantra. And then eventually we will have e-gold, e-precious metals, e-this and e-that. If we can trade it in the back end and we can hedge the currency risk, we can issue it as a token on a blockchain.
So you bring up a really good point. No, it's okay. You bring up a really good point that real world assets can be not just physical assets that we see and think about. It can be also from the aspect of currency as well. So I know that Dr. Smithmeyer, I'd like to see Scott answer the question because his platform is very different than what Jack was talking about. So I'd like to, if you could share the question for him, I'd like us to kind of see the contrast between the real world products and assets from that perspective.
Okay, Scott, we're going to ask regarding Ludate's integration of real-world assets into its ecosystem. Could you elaborate on the significance of this strategy for the platform and its users? And why is the inclusion of tangible assets considered a pivotal development in the context of digital marketplaces and asset management?
Well, we believe we're pretty heavy decentralized maxis over at Loot 8. We believe in the power to the people, because this is a moment in time that we believe that we can put the power of the currency, the power of goods and powers of things back in the hands of the people, and actually help people that don't have access to physical goods and create businesses and things around this. So yeah, we believe, first of all, most people don't understand what an NFT is, right? And so I just want to have a little quick conversation about that, because that's really important. It's not a JPEG. It's not this thing, right? It's actually the ability to, it's really more of a contract that you can tie to anything, which really unlocks the value. We can now unlock value in things that we've never had before. You can put a QR code on something and boom, now I can have value. I can buy into that, things that we've never had access to before. So our whole model is basically really thinking about how do we change the value of ownership, the experience, because now we can shift the ownership to other people. So I can have something and I can hand them the rights. Because if you think about the blockchain, you think about with smart contracts, it's the rights, rules, the permissions, the roles, all of those things built into that contract that allows you to basically share that with somebody else. I can hand the rights over to you. You can build on top of it. An example is right now, I've got a whole collection of stuff that I sent to the moon that I'm working on right now, where I have all these different artists that are actually building on top of my assets, right? I gave them the rights to do that. I maintain my royalties, my stuff in the background, and now they're building on top of it. They can win, because when you think of NFTs, it's not just like I said, a JPEG or something. It's their experiences. You build stories on top of them. It's an incredible tool set to really put the power back in the hands of the people. It allows them to basically change ownership and allow everybody to have a different experience with these assets. I always tell this story, which I think is really important, and I'm going to just real quickly say this. I went to an NFT meetup. I do this in every one of my conversations because I think this is important, because I believe all this NFT stuff, all this real world, puts the power back in the people to actually build their own businesses. I went to this NFT startup. There was a girl, she was 19 years old. She stood up and she says, I'm a photographer. I love photography. It's my favorite thing on the planet. And I get up every day and I shoot photography. I want to be the greatest photographer. She says, I got into NFTs about 9 months ago, and I'm so happy now because I live 100% off my NFTs. I pay my rent, I pay my car payments, I do everything. And what was really cool is then she said, oh, and I carved a piece of the smart contract off for my community center, and I'd already given them 2.5 ETH, which was the equivalent of $10,000 at that time. So you can see that the power, and this is somebody that's basically nobody knows, a 19-year-old girl. She was actually building her hive, because I believe if you want to survive in this new model, you want to survive, you got to build a hive. It's all about building those groups of people of like-minded. We're seeing that. It's not about the masses anymore. It's about these closed kind of networks where people can share and they can build on top of it. But the idea of tokenizing, virtually everything can be tokenized, and now we can unlock value everywhere. And so Loot 8 is really a system thinking about decentralization, putting the power back. Think of it like it's got SocialFi capabilities, but it's also it allows you to it's like a Web3 content management system that you'll be able to embed into any Web2 infrastructure and stuff, and then have all the power of these types of things on top of it. So this is a crazy time where we can put the power back in the hands of the people, go direct to wallet kind of marketing models. And again, I'm a little different than Jack over there. I'm concerned about the Western central banks, right? The central banking system. I get it, but it's been pretty pretty rough all these times. They basically control, especially when you look at the value of the dollars, lost 98% of its value over the years. I mean, again, if you buried $35 50 years ago in the ground and $35 worth of gold in the ground, or $50 worth of gold in the ground, what is that worth now, right? It's crazy how the inflation, how they print money and all of that kind of stuff. So we're really about, Loot 8 is about putting the power back in the hands of the people to build their own businesses actually on top of these this type of an infrastructure.
So Scott, I know you've been talking about the NFT platform. Dr. Smithmeyer, I'd like you to ask Enrique a question about Real Fund, only because of the fact that he's been involved with digital assets and real estate and a lot of other businesses within Spain. And it sort of ties in with what everyone has been talking about. So what is the question for Enrique?
Enrique, what role does standardization play in the interoperability of blockchain systems for real-world assets, and how can we help make this more achievable?
You're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you for the question. I will put things in context first. I'm a lawyer, and I spent most of my career with multinational corporations as a compliance officer. In 2017, I had this kind of epiphany. I wanted to do something different with my life. And then I discovered blockchain, right? So, and soon I realized the potential of blockchain and tokenization. And then I also realized that there were two very important things. One, there was a tremendous lack of education, and that there was no regulation. So I decided to devote myself, my life, to actually educate myself first, and then share with others. And in the meantime, kind of accidentally, I met an entrepreneur who had this interesting project. So he invited me to join him. First, as a lawyer, I created at the time my first, my small niche law firm. And then I joined him as a founder to create this real estate tokenization project. And this is interesting because then it gave me the opportunity to actually try to influence regulation modestly, because we applied for the first cohort of the Spanish fintech sandbox, and we were admitted. We are one of the 5 projects that have been approved by the securities regulator. And actually, it gave us the opportunity to actually share our experience with the regulator, and we believe that we actually help them understand better what this tokenization thing is, and also what the sandbox should be. So now, after 5 cohorts, I know that things are more streamlined and there is a better understanding. In the meantime, as Alejandro said at the beginning, the European Union started to regulate on blockchain. So we have now different regulations on markets in crypto assets, and we also have a pilot regime that actually expects to migrate the stock exchanges into blockchain technology if this pilot is satisfactory. This is fascinating because this is giving tremendous opportunities to do new things. For example, until now, even if most of the companies, at least in Spain, but in some parts of Europe, talk about tokenization of real estate, you cannot really do that and offer guarantees to the buyer of the token, because in many countries in the European Union, we operate a public registration system. So in order to offer guarantees to the buyer, you need to register the property. If you tokenize a property and fractionalize it, those who buy the fractions don't really have any legitimate rights unless they register the token, which actually you cannot do. Right? So you cannot today register a token in a public registry, right? We are trying with one of our projects, and we have already created an NFT that represents the entire property, but we cannot get it access to the property registry because the registrar is asking for a certificate that certifies that the blockchain in which it is created is immutable. And the question is, well, who can certify that? Who's the certifier that Ethereum is immutable, right? So it is very complex. So at the moment, we cannot really register the token of a property to offer the token holder, the token buyer, any legitimacy over the property. What do I mean by legitimacy? If I buy a token, or if you buy a token of a property that I'm selling you, but I sell the property to somebody else, and that person registers the property in the register, you have a token, but you have nothing. Right? You will need to find me and sue me, but you have no rights to the property whatsoever, right? So we see that lots of projects say, okay, buy tokenized properties. This is not possible. But the thing is, going back now to your question and the standards, things are changing, right? So now we have European regulations that allow us to tokenize things that we could not tokenize earlier. For example, we can now tokenize shares in companies, which is fascinating because, okay, even if you cannot tokenize the asset, you can tokenize the shares in the company that owns the asset. So then you can actually legitimately transfer shares, right, with all the protections. So if you buy a share of a company in which I have the asset, you have legitimate rights to the asset. So the whole thing changes, right? So it is really important that now we have this regulation. We kept saying in the past, the problem with blockchain is that there is no regulation, and this was only partially true, because even if we did not have that we have now specific regulation on blockchain, we had other regulations that applied to blockchain. For example, securities laws. Now we have specific regulations on securities. In the past, we didn't. So we saw things that were not right, and we continue to see things that are not right, that actually create kind of damage or risk to the market because things are not being right. So I think that legislation is very important for getting some common understanding or common ground on do things in a similar way. Here is where standardization really becomes very important. You want to make sure that the real world asset, be it real estate or, as Scott was saying, NFTs, represent the same rights no matter in which platform they are being negotiated, they are being traded, right? So you want the buyer of the token to have the same rights no matter what it is the technology that is being used, right? And then yes, regulation helps, but there are other ways to achieve this, right? To achieve this interoperability between the different networks and make sure that, yes, what you have represented by a token, which is a digital representation of a real world asset, is actually the same no matter where you trade it. I could continue, but I think I'm going to stop here. Please, thank you.
Your background knowledge, everyone's background knowledge is phenomenal. And I mean, you're talking both about the EU and Spain. We've had, Scott talk about the US. We've had Alejandro talk about, South America and Mexico, and Jack, is in the Nordic area. Liwa, you're in the UAE, and that is a sandbox that is always forward thinking. Dr. Smith-Meyer, what question do we have for Liwa? Because I think that we definitely need to.
Lua, what role does innovative technology such as artificial intelligence play in determining the difference between what is fake or real as a digital identity, and how is this incorporated with the blockchain?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and I'm kind of glad that I'm ending the panel discussion, because I'm looking at all the insights and everybody spoke about something that they're experienced in, and it's nice to see. So when I first read the title of the panel and I read that it's about tokenization, my mind, similar to everybody else, goes to the fact that we're looking at real world tokenization, we're looking at potentially NFTs that are kind of tokenizing art, tokenizing maybe to Scott's example the photography, and then maybe making money out of it, and then to Enrique's point of real estate tokenization. But something that kind of triggered in my mind, and this is something that I'm looking at more seriously now as the AI gets more and more sophisticated, is what about the tokenization of our identity? Because eventually we're looking at our identity potentially being lost completely. And maybe some people don't see this immediately, but as the AI gets more sophisticated, we're seeing something like Sora AI, and then the video circulated without anybody knowing that this is an AI, and everybody thought that it's actually a genuine video that was recorded by people, by a director essentially. And then you can look at the people that were in the recording, and you would think that they're actual real humans, but guess what? It's all generative AI. So what if in the future our identity is being used by the AI generating something that maybe is negatively going to impact us? So then it kind of goes in this spiral and rabbit hole of thinking where tokenization can be something beyond that scope. Something that also came into my mind, and as an example that is being done, is a project called the Humans. I've looked into this project quite a bit, and they came up with this idea of proof of identity. So essentially taking your identity and putting it into the blockchain and having your identity stored. So whenever anybody tries to kind of take your identity, well, guess what? You are the only owner of such identity. So that's kind of like something that I wanted to lead with and something that triggered my thought process. But then when we talk about AI and blockchain, I always look at it in 3 different layers. So I look at it at the top layer, which is IoT, Internet of Things, and the devices. So these are pretty much devices that are able to scan your face, scan your voice, and take in information about you. People might be like, we don't deal with these devices. Where guess what? Your phone is already a device as such. So by now, everybody, or specifically, the phone that you use has already your face recognition, your voice, and pretty much all the data around you. And then we look at the second layer, which is now AI, which is basically a mechanism. I wouldn't call it a tool myself, although I know people like to call it a tool. I consider it a factory. I consider it something beyond just a tool. I consider it something that can take this data and create something that is beyond the imagination of a human, because it's continuously learning, it's continuously improving, and continuously becoming more sophisticated. And then the base layer, which lots of people miss, is that you need all of this data and all of these resources to be stored somewhere. And guess what? Blockchain offers this solution. For now, it's not as scalable and it's not as quick as maybe traditional solutions, but eventually it will reach there. So then when you merge these 3 layers together, then pretty much, we start losing the thread between reality and the fictional world. And this is where the identity becomes very important. And that's why I am a very big advocate of tokenizing your identity and actually embedding it into a digital identity that you can prove through the blockchain.
So we have covered a lot of different topics. And for those that are listening, definitely all the speakers and how you can contact them will also be embedded within all of our blogs and that type of thing. We have a few minutes left, and I want to see if Dr. Smithmeyer has any last minute thoughts as we wrap up this first panel, because these conversations are very complex and we really are just touching the surface. And also we've raised a lot of vocabulary for those that are new to this field that, obviously they're going to want to research and learn a lot more. And this is definitely an evolving space. So Dr. Smithmeyer, do you have any last minute thoughts before we wrap up this panel and go to our second panel?
Well, one of the best resources out there for people that are looking to learn about the terminology and the taxonomy of the blockchain and cryptocurrency would be that little organization whose logo is right behind your head. They should go to bli.tools, and the vast amount of resources that are available there are just mind-blowing to bring people together. They have articles from amazing authors around the world that are bringing information to people, because as I said earlier, one of the greatest challenges we have is getting past the fear of not knowing. And that is one of the greatest phobias to overcome, because all you have to do is learn. And as humans, we're programmed to do that from birth. and having a great panel. The things that these guys have talked about today are the future. And people say about, oh, I wish I could live in the future. I wish I could live in Jefferson, or not Jefferson's times, the Jetsons' times. This is now. This is the progress that humanity has. And it's been an honor to work with you guys, to listen to what you guys have to say, because a couple of you I've known from GBA and met with you before, and I've heard you talk before, and just the amount of information that you guys have provided has been wonderful. And I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank Jackie and Matt for having me here as a moderator. I mean, just reading questions is a small part of what I can do, but I like being here and hearing this stuff firsthand from the legends of the industry right now. And I just want to thank you guys for your answers and for being here.
Well, we appreciate
everyone.
And so
again, everyone,
thank you. And we are going to navigate over to our second panel, because we have 2 more panels coming, and we really appreciate each one of you. And also, I will mention that everyone who you've seen on this panel, they are interviewed. They are part of the Blockchain Legal Institute in a variety of ways. So there's a lot of different longer talk shows that you can also listen to and learn about their background. So thank you so much for being on. Matt, did you have any feedback that you'd like to share as well, as we have our panelists exit, and our thank you for a word for our sponsors in a quick second.
Just big thanks to the panelists, bringing light to the issues. Like Chris said, education and learning is something that humans are programmed to do. I love the note about the Jetsons is here. We're on some cutting edge stuff. I really liked some of the remarks about these digital assets that have to do with your identity as it being a real world asset, which what's more real world than that? Well, I don't know. Who even knows what the real world is? But Jack as well, with the real world asset, the dollar or the fiat. Wow, that's an item that people really care about, isn't it? And I think that a lot of these things aren't talked about enough. So great work here, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Definitely. And thank you, Alex, for talking about the tech side. Enrique, Scott, Liwa, and Jack, and Chris, we will all obviously talk with all of you later. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jackie.
Ciao, everybody.
Doc, let's talk music.
Everyone wants to talk music with you. That's right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Enrique. Okay, so hopefully we've got another amazing leader of the free world coming on board here real quick. Is Ivan coming up before the commercials or after?
He should be coming up actually now. And we definitely want to say a thank you to all of our sponsors, and especially the American Crypto Academy for leading the way in the production of our summit, because without this great team behind the scenes, a lot of the navigation wouldn't happen. Ivan, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. This is the second time around, and we could not do this without you and the other team members behind the scenes. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm thrilled to be able to be here and welcome you all to the 2024 Blockchain Legal Summit, brought to you by the Blockchain Legal Institute and excitingly produced by the American Crypto Academy. CMO of the American Crypto Academy, as some of you may know, we're on the forefront of blockchain innovation and trying to push for technology and adopting this blockchain narrative and the freedom that comes with it, and the possibilities. And so I invite all of you to reach out and connect with us on all socials. On the X, we're US Crypto Academy, but American Crypto Academy everywhere else. And definitely looking forward to the rest of the summit and what these exciting speakers have to share with us and discuss. And for those of you hungry for more knowledge, I do invite you to tune in on the X every morning at 9:30 a.m. for our Learn Crypto Radio morning show for about 30-40 minutes, where we touch on all the latest news and Web3 culture. So thank you so much.
We definitely, appreciate what you're doing on the Twitter Spaces with information, because you do a lot of research. And, in getting background knowledge, it's important to know where your resources are. And that is exactly, you know, why Blockchain Legal Institute was created. So there's a lot of diverse resources within our decentralized space, and American Crypto Academy definitely is a quality resource to check out and to listen to. I know this next panel is all about laws and compliance. And we have, again, a stellar panel from around the world, from Bermuda to the Cayman Islands to Kenya to Denmark, Sweden. So I'm going to start to introduce our panelists as they pop in. We have Born Collier, who's a senior corporate counsel from Piedmont Law based in Bermuda. We have Tatiana Turgo, who's an attorney that has a very diverse background from Sweden. We have Robert, who is partner in TMM and Partners, and he's in Kenya, and he's the chairman of the blockchain subcommittee of the LSK Nairobi branch, and doing a lot in terms of development of cryptocurrency legislation there. We have Anthony Howell, who is the overseas representative of Bermuda, who's based in Washington and who's working on a lot of different projects. And we have Scott Hines, who is a seasoned executive with a track record of transforming startups into a variety of different markets. And actually, right now, he has a new startup called AI LegalWise, which is going to be revolutionizing the legal field for what they need. And then we have Fiona Brennan, who is with Marfire, who is the director of DAO services in Cayman, and she has a variety of background too that I'm going to have her explain a little bit more about the DAOs and everything else she's doing in the Web3 space. And we have Dr. Bandodari, who is the director of Galter, who is based in India. And he has over 45 years of experience in teaching and research and management with 4 major universities. Definitely a prolific writer as well as a legal scholar. And we, you know, again, we have so many people here who have a variety of backgrounds. Born, you are the moderator, and we're going to have you start off by asking your first question. And we want to welcome everyone because, again, there is so much we're going to touch on, but this is, again, just the start of a whole conversation, because we all know in this space it is evolving and it's very difficult to keep up with the changes. So, Born, welcome. And who would you like to ask the first question to?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon to everyone. Very pleased to be here. I'd like to start by with my first question to Robert. And in particular, we're very interested to hear about the perspective in Africa. Robert, you're a leader in the field in Kenya. You're involved in and you've seen developments in Kenya, but across the region. We're very interested to understand from you, what are the strategies that can be implemented to harmonize blockchain-related legal frameworks across the region? We're very interested to understand from you, what are the
So I think it would be, I hope you can hear me. So I think it would be prudent to give you a background of legal and regulatory developments in Kenya and across Africa in relation to virtual assets before I come to the strategies being implemented, right? Obviously, I'll start with my home country, Kenya. From around 2015 till 2021, the Central Bank of Kenya had taken a cautionary approach, whereby it was cautioning, banks and other financial institutions from dealing with companies and startups that are in the virtual asset space. So it was more of a wait and see approach and a prohibitory approach. But thanks due to the legal and regulatory developments across across Africa and the globe, they've changed their tone. And by that, I mean Namibia, Botswana, Mauritius, South Africa, and Nigeria. They've all come up with various policies and laws trying to, mainstream virtual assets. by, so in Mauritius, they have the virtual assets, the VITOS, the Virtual Assets and Initial Token Offering Act, which basically allows for, it provides for licensing, registration requirements for virtual assets service providers. So we are looking at people in custodial services. We are looking at exchanges as well as token issuers. Same in Namibia. Namibia have an act of parliament, which was enacted, I believe, in 2021. Botswana as well have an act of parliament that was enacted in 2022. From South Africa, it was more of the Financial Services Conduct Authority, which is the equivalent of the SEC. They're in charge of the capital markets. They released guidelines for crypto companies. And actually, as recent as last week, we just saw over 60 companies, crypto companies, are just approved and licensed to operate in South Africa. Nigeria, there's a lot going on in Nigeria, and the SEC for Nigeria did release guidelines on the same in terms of virtual asset service providers, but the implementation is quite I'd say it's not yet there, because as we speak, the CEO of Binance Africa has actually been unlawfully detained. He's a Kenyan citizen. Yeah, he was invited by the Nigerian parliament to discuss the developments in terms of virtual assets. If for those who are not aware, the Nigerian currency, the e-naira, has been devaluing quite rapidly. So a lot of Nigerians have been using virtual assets to hedge against inflation. And I believe over $26 billion worth of transactions occurred in Binance. And it created, as you can imagine, a whole new dollar market. And this brought a lot of friction between the companies and between Binance and the Nigerian government, and we're trying to see if we can resolve that. So that's just an overview of the regulatory developments in Africa in relation to virtual assets. So in terms of the strategies that can be implemented to harmonize blockchain-related legal frameworks, for me, at number one, call for international cooperation and dialogue. Right, so we're looking at setting up best principles, and this can be done by establishing international blockchain committees to create and working groups to discuss and propose standards for blockchain technology and also virtual assets, and also setting up bilateral and multilateral agreements to look at tax obligations as well as trade agreements, because in Africa especially, virtual assets have come in handy in terms of facilitating cross-border trade as well as other use cases, remittances. So that international cooperation and dialogue, I believe, is critical. As well as number two, I'd say adoption of model laws and frameworks, taking into account what's happening in other jurisdictions. I'm glad we have someone from Bermuda, or people from Bermuda rather, on the call. Bermuda, I think, were quite early. 2018, they had a virtual asset law in place. We're looking at MiCA as well. Switzerland has been a leading, country in terms of setting up virtual asset service providers laws, as well as Cyprus, Singapore as well, Dubai with VARA. So basically, looking at setting up the model laws and frameworks and best practices and guidelines, right, as well as code of ethics, considering the FTXs of this world and the unscrupulous people in the businesses that might want to scam, and people who aren't quite familiar with the technology. Another would be a favorite of mine is regulatory sandboxes and innovation hubs. So establishment of regulatory sandboxes to allow for understanding of the technology, as well as if it's a global regulatory sandbox, to help identify common regulatory barriers, as well as promoting opportunities for harmonization in terms of implementation of the sandboxes, because in most jurisdictions, especially in emerging economies, you'd find that the sandboxes they haven't been fully digitized, they're paper-based. So that just ensuring that the regulatory sandboxes are up to international standards in terms of technology, as well as implementation. Another thing is setting up innovation hubs. Like I said, the use cases for virtual assets in Africa especially, they're quite diverse. They're solving real world problems, right? So, if be it cross-border trade, remittances. And so the innovation hubs can serve as critical institutions for promoting research and developments and facilitating knowledge exchange among various countries, right? And obviously another one is education and capacity building. I think someone from the previous panel mentioned the importance of having comprehensive education programs for both regulators, policymakers, to increase the understanding of virtual assets and how they work, as well as regular stakeholder engagement. So off the top of my head, that's what I can come up with. Thank you for that question.
So Robert, you for those that are not familiar with the breadth of your knowledge and also everything that you explained, you covered a whole continent and more. So definitely appreciate the insight that you provided. Born, who's the next question that we're going to be asking on this esteemed legal panel? Because again, there's a lot of different compliance areas that are developing all across the world. And obviously what Robert just said is just a drop in the bucket. Who's going to be sharing next?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Robert. I agree with Jackie. That was very comprehensive and an excellent start. Thank you. And in fact, for a couple of things that Robert spoke to, I think we can jump over to Anthony to give us some insight about the Bermuda perspective. So as Robert mentioned, Bermuda, and I'm also based in Bermuda as well, so familiar with it. Bermuda launched its digital asset regulations and regulatory infrastructure in 2018, which was relatively early. As it has evolved, it is quite similar to the virtual asset service provider model, which exists now in many countries and was promoted by the Financial Action Task Force in early 2019, 2020. And so, and also, as Robert mentioned, Bermuda features a sandbox with its regulatory regime. So my question to Anthony, to elaborate on that, how are emerging blockchain applications impacting both the growth in international trade in digital assets and services, and also the enforcement and operation of international trade laws and treaties? And also, how do you see, from your position representing the government in Bermuda and traveling internationally, how do you see Bermuda supporting these developments? And where else do you think there needs to be focus?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Born, and appreciate your insight on that, Robert, and for shouting out Bermuda. We have done very much in our power in order to take advantage of the new technological developments within the industry itself. And as Born had also noted as well, 2018, we came out with the Digital Asset and Business Act called DABA, as well as the Issuance Act, the DIA. And so we had a very good head run in this industry, been going on strong now, and always looking at new ways to develop the industry going forward and seeing what was out there. And in my role specifically, focusing in the United States, seeing where there are gaps, where they exist, and how we really can fill those gaps and continue to be a strategic leader in the industry itself. From the impact of what we can see so far, one of the biggest notes that we've taken away from blockchain, for example, is the transparency that's involved and the immutable records that's attributed to it, but the fact that it's very difficult to alter these kind of records. So what we kind of see is compliance is a big factor. It's one that's very important for Bermuda as well. In order for us to always maintain high levels of compliance, our regulating body, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, is the regulator in charge of the digital asset sector of our industry. And so, when we go about with the sandbox, or when companies have an interest in setting up in Bermuda or engaging with Bermuda through collaboration projects, one thing that is of note is the level of compliance. And so when we see how the industry itself interacts on this specific level, it really does heighten and show the validity of it in the simple fact that it is very transparent. It does reach a certain level of compliance that we're very comfortable in dealing with, and that it's an upward momentum at this trajectory. And so that's really how we view it. I think in terms of for the future and areas where it can be, how we can see improvement or continue to advance the growth. And I think Robert had noted it as well, is through, in my opinion as well, education. Not only education in terms of those who are unfamiliar with the concepts of digital assets or blockchain or along that line, and people who are maybe unfamiliar with the technology and its applications, but also on the lower level in the education through the youth. And so we're very proud to have various organizations that are partnered with the government itself, and people that we have great relationships with that are looking at this avenue to strengthen the next generation who are going to be entering this industry. In fact, I've been working with Jackie for a little while now with some of her projects that are very closely aligned with education, and we're very happy with the trajectory of that as well. And we continue to look for different ways in order to promote education, sandbox, innovativeness, and development within this industry. And that's pretty much how we look at it. And just maybe one more point on that is we like to also assess what other jurisdictions are doing. And I also am a member of the African Policy and Strategy. I do write for them as well and do research, and we focus on West Africa. And so I do see the different avenues that companies are taking within Nigeria, for example. And as Robert pointed out, it's been a little bit of issue with the physical currency. So now digital currency has become the replacement currency, and we're seeing this shift over to digital dollarizations. And so this is a great segue into demonstrating how the technology is applicable and how the technology is transparent and how we can utilize these methods that we've developed in order to see the development continue on.
So, Anthony, I want to thank you for the little shout out there. And for those that don't know, there's another Bitcoin Cinderella book that is in the process. It's called The Bitcoin Cinderella and the Pink Sands Treasure of Bermuda, which will definitely feature the Bermuda sandbox and its culture and a whole nother adventure that I'm very excited to share with everyone. I think that we need to hop over to the Cayman Islands. I'm not ignoring, our other two guests at the moment, but Bermuda is definitely a thought leader, but the Cayman Islands is also a thought leader. So, Born, what's our question for Fiona?
Thank you, Jackie. And to introduce this question, I thought I would just highlight a couple of things which Anthony mentioned. And to add to the comment in respect of Bermuda, my day-to-day job involves me working on the licensing of companies which apply for a digital asset business license. And as Anthony spoke to, issues around transparency and compliance are very important in all settings where digital asset and crypto asset businesses are licensed. And very interestingly, a big part of the picture in Bermuda is the regulator, the Bermuda Monetary Authority. And what you have is a good legislative regulatory framework and a good regulator in Bermuda. And that applies to other jurisdictions too. In respect to the Cayman Islands, it is a jurisdiction that has a similar financial services industry, but on blockchain, it also is a thought leader. And one area where it has shown thought leadership, and it's an area of current innovation and that shows these issues quite well, is around this new type of virtual corporate structure, which is called a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO. The original DAO projects began, I actually read the first one was in 2014 by a US-based lawyer, but the first project which garnered attention and a lot of money and then some controversy was in 2016, which was a project in Europe. But since then, the sector has grown significantly. I saw on the weekend a digital dashboard reported that there are over 20,000 now DAOs which they track that have locked up over $40 billion worth of assets. So this is a massive growth area, but one in which regulators and being regulated is becoming quite important. Now, that's something which in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda doesn't have a DAO structure or licensing yet. We're very keen and working on that. But in the meantime, there are businesses in the Cayman Islands which have that structure. So I think we'd all, furthering on, Fiona, would like to ask you about the regulatory framework in the Cayman Islands, how it's adapting to accommodate the advancements in blockchain, including the emergence of DAOs or decentralized autonomous organizations. And from your experience, what have been the key legal innovations or proposals that have been introduced to support the growth and governance of these technologies?
Great, thank you both. And Born, just with your introduction there, it really gives an idea into, the vast number of DAOs and the value that is locked up within these DAOs out there, I haven't heard those figures before, and it's really incredible. I think the Cayman Islands has been to the forefront of this industry, and particularly on the DAO side. We have a form of company that's called a foundation company, and that's often used by these structures where they want to have a legal entity in place that can do real life things like enter into contracts, open up bank accounts, and everything like that. The foundation company structure actually came in as a kind of corporate trust entity, but it has been adopted by this industry because it feeds into the ethos of this industry, as you can have a memberless company. So you can have this corporate entity in place that doesn't have members, that doesn't have shareholders, and provides a very flexible structure for DAOs to use where they want a corporate entity. What it does have is directors, and I'm a former lawyer and now I act as a director for a lot of these structures. And it also has two other roles, a supervisor and a registered office secretary. The way that these have been kind of evolved by the community is by allowing for token holders, or the DAO, so people who hold these tokens from projects, to have sort of unique governance rights where they can vote on what will be done with those big treasuries that you mentioned earlier and what actions they want taken on that. That's typically done by putting in place a governance framework, which might be a set of bylaws, which might be a council charter. And it really is such a flexible structure that's changing over time, and that can be molded into whatever works for these projects. I think what makes Cayman quite an attractive jurisdiction is that a lot of the bigger protocols and projects have set up these structures. So there's, a publicly available framework that people can use. A lot of projects think that transparency is at the core of this industry. And with that, they're happy to publish these rules, to publish their documents, to be really transparent in how they're setting up. And that has also helped the industry to evolve, and it's helped other people who are putting in place these frameworks. I just want to touch quickly on the other side of it, which is the regulated side. So a big part of what makes Cayman Islands attractive as well is that since 2020, we've had our virtual asset service provider legislation in place. So like with a lot of other jurisdictions, you get that regulatory certainty. You know whether what you're doing falls within regulation or falls outside of regulation. And that gives people a real comfort, because there are plenty of jurisdictions that unfortunately don't offer that certainty right now. And because of that, we're attracting a lot of founders over here. We also have a really friendly regulator here in CIMA, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority. They're keen to engage with this industry, and a real life example of how they're doing that is by opening up a consultation on our virtual asset service provider legislation to the public for consultation. So they've set up a GitHub where people can feedback into changes they're proposing. I'm part of the Blockchain Association here as well in the Cayman Islands, and we're really engaging with industry to get that real feedback. If you are a VASP, if you're a service provider in Cayman, here are some changes that are coming in. How will that affect your business? And the government here CIMA is looking for that feedback and looking to only make changes that will protect the consumers, protect the jurisdiction, but also will allow these companies to operate. So it's a big industry here in Cayman. It's ever growing, and it's just a really exciting one to be part of.
Thank you. And I can say to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, Fiona. From a legal perspective, DAOs are very, very interesting vehicles. They have elements of corporate structures, including the service provision and the carrying out of administrative functions. They also have elements that are not within a corporation, being derived from a foundation structure, not having members, etc. And as a whole, as an industry, they operate in Cayman, it seems, with a framework of oversight transparency, which is very important. At a time when there are DAOs out there in the world that have some or none of those elements. So it really is an interesting landscape, but one in which there's there are still forms that we would recognize, including the service provision and so on. And great to hear that in Cayman there's that further evolution and engagement as well. For the next question, I thought we'd turn over to, if you like, the other end of the scale. So, Scott, being in the AI space, AI itself is a technology rapidly evolving and getting the attention of people worldwide for the possibilities of what it brings. It's well discussed and noted that there are certain complementary features of AI and blockchain. And I think one of the speakers earlier on talking about identity noted that, in fact, there's potentially a need for a joining of the technology. So as AI proliferates, the question of authentication around the output of AI, especially when it's linked to people, is an output of an AI program, a picture, an image, or a video actually, purportedly to be of a person, about a person, is it actually true? And I've heard it discussed quite frequently about the power of digital signatures and materials on a blockchain to improve and perhaps be necessary for decent AI. But meanwhile, of course, AI evolves to rapidly improve and evolve even the regular workplace in the non-blockchain space. So taking that into account in our wide-ranging discussion of the legal environment for blockchain and the development of blockchain, I think it is a good point to actually ask about AI fitting into that, and just about your perspective from your work in your current AI firm at the moment.
Sure, thank you very much. So one, I think that what you said was very accurate in terms of the blending together of and the need for AI and blockchain and the need for blockchain and AI. And I'm particularly kind of compelled by some of the other speakers here about how they're putting in place these sandboxes, regulatory compliance frameworks, because those same type of things that are being performed around blockchain now are going to be required for the application of AI in the law as well. And I think that these two complementary technologies, and one of the things I felt most compelled by here is I liked that a great deal of the discussion about the types of virtual assets that we're interested in applying blockchain to aren't digital assets that are purely either cryptocurrency or type of NFT type of tokens. There are significantly valuable and important virtual digital assets out there in the legal space that go way beyond crypto and NFTs, particularly with things like evidence and the treatment of evidence in legal cases, authentication, even down to things like digital twin representations of things like real estate and healthcare. And I feel that as we move forward with AI, and that will happen very rapidly, binding AI together with blockchain is probably the only valid solution I can see in technology today to give human beings a mechanism for ensuring that the way that data and these virtual assets and the use of AI is compliant with these regulatory frameworks that are going to be established. And I think that one of the questions that we had been talking kind of before this was, well, what areas, is AI going to impact in law, and particularly in blockchain law? And my response was, it's probably easier to make the list of places where it's not going to impact things. And in those areas, it's probably two basic things. And that's one, human being, the law and all of our discussion here is still going to be driven by humans. You're still going to have humans that have responsibility, that have liability, that have responsibility as the legal entity. It's never going to be the case where you're just going to be able to kind of turn over to either blockchain or AI the actual legal responsibility and liability for the ownership, the management, the liability of handling either these AI systems or handling the output and storage of information inside of blockchain. So one, it's still going to be all about humans. And two, there are still going to be a great deal of bureaucracy and regulation and compliance that needs to be applied to how we apply AI across all of these things very broadly. But all the other aspects of how we're going to manage and utilize AI and blockchains within the law, it's going to be applied 360 degrees across every area of these different environments. And my opinion is that by binding together blockchain and AI, you need both of those things together in order to really utilize these technologies effectively and in a controlled way within a broad range of legal frameworks.
That's an incredibly powerful statement. Thank you, Scott, and really puts this in context, because underlying this is great technological change. As you were speaking, I was thinking back to what was one of the early phrases I came across in blockchain, particularly when the first projects were launching and in some cases failing, which was the phrase that you would hear, which I think would be interesting to us as lawyers, that is, code is law. Code certainly isn't law. Code needs to be interpreted, AI and operated, and AI is a part of that, particularly on scaling up. But and then raises the question, what does law and practice look like combining the two? So I thought for my next question, Tatiana, we could turn over to you to hear from your experience and practice as to what is happening in Europe. As we discussed before our panel, you mentioned there has been a number of new laws and standards that have been promulgated by the European Commission, European Union. And in general, I think we're quite interested to understand, what is the strategy in Europe regarding blockchain technology and its implementation in the European Union? What are some of the legal considerations that companies should be mindful of when developing their business plans in this evolving regulatory landscape?
Okay, thank you. European Commission's strategy regarding blockchain technology supports a so-called blockchain gold standard containing 5 elements. Environmental sustainability, which means that blockchain technology should be sustainable and energy efficient. Data protection is very important, as blockchain technology must be compatible with European strong data protection and privacy regulations. Digital identity. Blockchain technology should respect Europe's evolving digital identity framework. Cybersecurity. Blockchain technology should be able to provide very high levels of cybersecurity. And finally, interoperability, which means that blockchains should be interoperable between themselves and also with the systems outside. Well, I would like to mention only just a few key elements of the EU blockchain strategy, as the list is pretty long. So I want to mention promoting blockchain for sustainability, where the focus has to be on fostering sustainable economic development and addressing an issue of climate change. Then also what I find very interesting and especially relevant for public sector is building a pan-European public services blockchain, EBCI. EBCI was created in 2018 with the aim to create cross-border services for public administrations, businesses, citizens. And in terms of use cases, I would like to mention that EBCI is used for digital identity, trusted data sharing, notarization, and much more. What is very interesting for me as a lawyer is promoting legal certainty, as the European Commission supports a pan-European framework to avoid legal and regulatory fragmentation. In terms of implementation across the European Union, I would like to have a look at public sector and private sector very briefly. As concerns public sector, the use of blockchain technology by public administrations at local levels is an overall positive trend, as public administrations understand that blockchain technology could improve both the effectiveness and efficiency of public administrations. However, there are still challenges to overcome. First of all, implementing a blockchain-based solution is a very complex project, as it involves a variety of legal challenges, organizational challenges, and even technical challenges. Then also the public administrations at national levels still must take quite a lot of steps before blockchain technology can solve the real life challenges. And here, of course, the launch of EBCI has a is fundamental in promoting support for blockchain-based services across Europe. As concerns private sector, the European Commission launched the European Regulatory Sandbox for blockchain in February 2023. A sandbox is a control environment where companies can test their products and services while engaging with relevant regulators. Well, as concerns the key legal considerations that companies should be mindful of, well, first of all, the business plans that company develops, they should ensure tools supporting the execution of EU blockchain strategy. Also, they have to ensure compliance with EU legislation. And there is an interesting development within the EU as new legislation has been adopted. I just want to mention the most interesting ones, the most well-known, which is MiCA regulation, Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation, which entered into force in June 2023. Well, it applies on businesses such as custodial wallets, exchanges for crypto-to-crypto transactions, crypto trading platforms, crypto asset advising firms. What is interesting as regards this regulation is that there are, as always, well, it's very long, it's very comprehensive, of course, and it sets a list of obligations for issuers of crypto assets. The advantages of MiCA is, of course, that it gives legal certainties, and the rules are tailored to fit crypto. But there are a few disadvantages, for example, that the rules are very tough, and the fines are also very high. Also an issue of NFTs that are in a gray area. So we still expect the Commission report by mid-2025 on whether further laws are needed to address, for example, the issue of NFTs and decentralized finance. I would also like to mention the very recent EU Act, that is EU Artificial Intelligence Act, that was adopted by the European Parliament on March 13th this year. And it is considered to be the world's first comprehensive horizontal legal framework for artificial intelligence. Well, this act is a part of a wider package of policy measures, which together supposed to guarantee the safety and fundamental rights of people and businesses when it comes to artificial intelligence. The rules are, in briefly, as such that the act addresses risks specifically created by AI applications, and the act prohibits AI practices that pose unacceptable risks. So it is very important for businesses to, first of all, perform inventory and classification of risks, develop a strategy for AI development, develop a strategy for AI life cycle, and also to handle or set forth AI principles and risk management guidelines. IA Act applies, by the way, to providers and developers of AI systems that are marketed or used within the EU, and which is interesting, regardless of whether those providers or developers are established in the EU or another country.
So
then,
let me ask you,
yeah?
Tatiana, let me ask you a question, because you have laid out so much for all of us to absorb, which has been phenomenal, especially for those that are not familiar with all the regulations that are in existence, both in your area as well as in other locations. I actually have a wild card question for everyone on the panel. So I'm not quite sure, it's open to everyone, but as you know, my background's also law. And I'm very curious on, we have all these regulations that are happening, but we also have, and I know that was one of the reasons why LegalWise AI was created, to help with lawsuits and things that are, digesting the elements within depositions and things like that. What have you seen in each of your countries in terms of the number of legal cases that have been filed with respect to digital asset, either scams or compliance areas of breaches, from the Cayman to the Bermuda to Kenya to, all the various countries? Have we seen an increase in the number of lawsuits that have been filed? And how are we addressing that? Because again, we have these regulations which is supposed to protect, but what happens on the opposite side of this? So I don't know, Fiona, in your island, Cayman, has there been an increase of lawsuits? And we'll have everyone kind of discuss this.
Sure, it's a really interesting question. And I think, when we think of regulation, it's consumer protection. That regulation is there to protect. In terms of enforcement, a big push in Cayman over the last few years was to add more people to the enforcement unit for kind of ORCIPs over here, because a lot of the kind of global lists that determine regulation want to see that enforcement. They want to see people actually carrying out investigations in the jurisdictions and protecting the consumer. So certainly there has been an uplift from what I've been told in terms of those investigations, in terms of kind of information sharing under the various regimes to protect the consumer. And that will have impacted Cayman as well, because there are so many entities based over here. I guess one of the key things when people think of Cayman, they don't always think of AML and KYC checks and sanctions checks, but actually it's really important for us as a jurisdiction. Cayman was on the grey list for some time, but is off the grey list now. And that was partly driven because of the resources that have gone into the consumer protection regime over here. So in fact, I think people are quite surprised at the level of enforcement and checks that are carried out by entities based over here. And that's largely driven by the people involved in the industry here. As we all know, if something goes wrong for a jurisdiction and in the industry, it doesn't look great. So a big part of what we do over here is try to protect against that happening.
I've kind of piggyback. Yeah, I was gonna say, Jack, I'll kind of piggyback off that as well a bit. Because again, the BMA is very particular about these, any type of activities that can harm the reputation of not only Bermuda itself, but the industry. I mean, we've already seen contention with FTX and, the banks, feeling they're rich afterwards, and how that kind of did rattle, blockchain and the security of it, and so from that standpoint, Bermuda's always been very forward and very active. The BMA is a Quango, so it operates independently on its own. It does its due diligence, proper due diligence, and dot the I's, cross the T's to make sure that the industry is always safeguarded and Bermuda is safeguarded. Although I like to hear, I know you're moderating, Bourne, but you have more visibility on the ground than I probably would in the legal aspect of it. So I'd love to hear your input if you've seen anything.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. In terms of actual litigation, there has not been any, as far as we're aware, before the Bermuda courts. I think there is about, 25 companies that hold the digital asset business license. As there have been shifts in the sector, some of them have scaled back their activity or changed. So there has been changes that you've seen in the composition of licensees with global trends, but very fortunately, and for the reasons Anthony mentioned, Bermuda's, with its strong regulation, has been able to maintain a cautious and a safe position from a regulatory perspective. One of the things that I understood in coming to Bermuda and working in the jurisdiction is that the digital asset regulatory regime was evolved out of Bermuda's insurance industry, and Bermuda in insurance and reinsurance is a global leader and has very high standards of regulation and supervision of those which it licenses, which it applies to digital asset businesses. As a jurisdiction, Bermuda has so far what you might consider a relatively low footprint in terms of number of licensed businesses, but those who are here have maintained a high standard of compliance. And it goes without saying as well that Bermuda is a jurisdiction like Cayman that adopts the highest level of anti-money laundering standards and compliance. So against that background, there has not been, therefore, a large number of disputes contributing to case law in Bermuda, although I think all practitioners in Bermuda are keeping a track of the developments. Of course, with Bermuda being a common law jurisdiction, a lot of the decisions elsewhere in many jurisdictions where digital asset and crypto asset companies are based is relevant to the jurisprudence in Bermuda, but there's not been any disputes as yet.
Robert, what about in your area? What have you seen in terms of legal cases filed and challenges and decisions? You're muted.
I hope you can hear me. So in Kenya, the courts have pronounced themselves on the matter, and there have been two landmark cases whereby there was one involving an ICO, initial coin offering. And like I said, there's been no legal or regulatory framework. So essentially, it's like Fiona was referring to earlier on in terms of consumer protection, investor protection. So the Capital Markets Authority, which is the ambient regulator in terms of virtual assets, or when it comes to virtual assets, they took the company, it was called Kennycoin, that was doing an initial offering, and they took them to court, and actually successful, as Kennycoin had not sought the CMA licensing or permit to conduct the ICO, and the courts actually placed the mandate on the Capital Markets Authority to regulate the virtual asset sector space. And also there was one whereby that's the first case, was another landmark case whereby it involved, so in Kenya, there's something called mobile money. Mobile money is quite prevalent. Most people can't afford, banks are seen as, bank accounts are seen as elitist. So having a mobile money, all you need is just a SIM card, and then you have a bank, technically have a bank in your phone. So these guys had built a platform whereby you could use mobile money to buy Bitcoin, right? But unfortunately, they were taken to court, as innovative as that was. And the reason was it was like a PSP, a payment service provider kind of platform. And they hadn't sought the requisite, permits or licenses from the relevant regulators, this being the Central Bank of Kenya and the Capital Markets Authority. And it was quite an interesting case. And actually, the courts actually pronounced themselves on the Howey test. So it's the first time you're seeing, a justice or a judge of a Kenyan court going through the Howey test and classifying virtual assets as securities and whatnot. So those off the top of my head are the two most prominent cases that have been going on. As opposed to cases, there have also been cautionary notices that have been issued by the regulators. This is both the Capital Markets Authority cautioning the general public against purchasing or participating in various initial token offerings or ICOs. So the reason being, actually, let me give you a better picture. Kenya actually is the third largest market in terms of virtual assets in the continent. So it's a huge thriving market despite there being no legal and regulatory framework. And with that also comes the huge number of frauds, as you can imagine, because of the number of people. So there have been quite a few scams per se, whereby people do fake initial offerings and scam the general public. So that is what the Capital Market Authority rather has been cautioning the public against. And number two is the Central Bank of Kenya, like I mentioned early on. They've been issuing cautionary notices with regard to financial institutions working or dealing with the VASPs or anyone in the VASP space. So off the top of my head, that's what comes to mind in terms of jurisprudence in the sector. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that because of the fact that we're all, as attorneys, trying to create the regulations that will protect people, but we also have to look at the flip side as to what actually is being, what lawsuits are actually being filed, because that also will define and determine what happens next. Tatiana, in your area.
Hey, Jackie, Scott had his hand up. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. He was kind enough to raise his hand.
I'm actually going to save you to the end, but go for it.
All right. When the question you were asking about what do we see in the United States around the growth of litigation, the United States for litigation is kind of the worst of two worlds. By far the largest litigation environment on the world. Litigation costs have skyrocketed, particularly for corporations here in the United States over the past 5 or 6 years. There's been a more than 50% increase in litigation matters for corporations over the past 5 or 6 years. There's been a 70% increase in cost of litigation for corporations. Litigation costs now are approaching $30 billion per year in the US outside of awards and settlement. That's just the amount of money spent on going through litigations. So we have by far the most active litigation market. And a lot of that currently in the past 4 or 5 years has really been pushed by the rise of litigation funding in the United States. The flip side of that is that we also have the least effective kind of regulatory and legislative environment probably in the whole world. The federal government is virtually ineffective at introducing legislative regulations in this space. I mean, here we are. It's 2014. We still don't have a federal privacy law in the United States. All the rest of the civilized countries in the world have very well tested and enacted privacy laws. The United States federal government can't seem to figure out how to do that. And then you would get in this environment where the states kind of do their own thing, and each state comes up with this like patchwork quilt of laws. So I wanted to thank Tatiana and the Europeans for leading the way on this and for making their laws extraterritorial. so that the Americans can't pretend that, well, it doesn't really apply to me. That's what the Europeans are doing. But what I see in terms of litigation for blockchain and digital assets, one, we're relying primarily on existing financial laws. It's laws that were kind of drafted and conceived of oftentimes 20 years ago, when there was kind of the Sarbanes-Oxley type of laws that were put in place. So we're trying to take these laws that are decades old and apply them in today's modern digital asset environment. As well, it tends to focus on high-profile cases rather than the lots of other cases that are potential out there, because that's where the money is. You know, the money's all in funding these large, high-profile cases. And sadly, it ends up being driven by common law. We're developing kind of this common law history based on different cases that are being decided in different jurisdictions, different states. And so I figured I'd go before Tatiana, because, you know, in a lot of ways, the United States is looking towards the Europeans many times for leadership and direction on this. I appreciate that opportunity to pontificate on this.
Not a problem. Actually, you're leading us into the next panel, which we will be going there in just a few minutes. But Tatiana, you have 2 minutes to kind of just share what's going on in your neck of the woods, because our next panel is all about finance and banking and, you know, everything that we have been laying the groundwork in this panel and the previous one gets, you know, discussed in the next panel too. Tatiana, share what's going on court-wise in your area before we kind of navigate over to panel 3.
Yeah, thank you. It's easy. I would say it's too early to talk about litigations regarding this area in the European Union, as the legislation is very new. The MiCA regulation, although it's been adapted already, it's not fully implemented. It will be fully implemented by the end of this year. And the same with the other legislation that is really, really new. And although the regulations are directly applicable in the member states, there are still measures that each member state has to take. For example, under MiCA regulation, to appoint some supervision authorities, like in Sweden, it's been adopted a law that handles specifically this issue, and Swedish financial supervision authorities will be appointed. So there are still steps to take. And of course, under these circumstances, we cannot talk about suit cases. Thank you.
So yeah, no, I appreciate everyone on this panel. You have such a depth of knowledge. And again, as I've mentioned at the earlier panel, we'll definitely have everyone's contact information in the blog below. I want to thank every one of you who's on. Born, thank you for moderating. I know that while you are navigating over and our next panel is coming on, we are going to be sharing just a few seconds of maybe 1 to 2 minutes of thank you to our sponsors, because we definitely have a large group of behind the scenes sponsors that have supported us. But I want to thank everyone on this panel.
And
right
Jackie,
now.
let me give a quick closing remark here too. So yeah, thanks to everybody on the panel. Yeah, thanks everyone on the panel. I just want to repeat a couple of things I heard. So I like that Born opened this conversation talking about how code is not law, because it's true. It's just not. As much as not yet, I think is my point, right? So I think actually the code here will help. The code will help the law. I think something we heard from Liberland, president earlier, about how there's no clerks in their court system. However, the judges are humans. We may see that AI eventually carries weight in this world, and I think that the code will definitely help with reciprocity. It'll help with innovation within the law. But I like I like a lot of important stuff was shared in this panel. A lot of very cutting edge, sort of cutting edge, I guess, policy that's affecting people. I want to mention as well, just kind of how Robert started this conversation with the people of, Nigeria, and maybe to some extent Kenya, I'm not sure, but how they've as as humans, are seeking this new technology to alleviate some of the pressure that's coming from an existing and legacy financial system. And I think that that's really where all these laws are meant to be, not just necessarily for corporate enforcement or policy enforcement, but definitely hopefully a focus on empowering people with fair money and people to be sovereign. So great conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, again, we're in a decentralized community, but it's all about the people. So thank you, everyone, for everything that you've shared. And now we're going to go on to the thank you for our sponsors and the next panel, which is all about finance, which actually created the decentralized community because everyone wanted economic freedom. So we're going to have all you move out, and we're going to move our next panel in.
Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Fiona. Thanks, Tatiana. Thanks, Anthony.
So we have a wonderful group of sponsors. We definitely cannot thank you enough for continuing to support the Blockchain Legal Institute Summits. Our next one will be in October for sure. But right now we're going to start introducing our panel 3, which is all about DeFi, blockchain, legacy, and all about the changes. And our moderator for today is Amber Welch. She's the co-founder and CEO of FinSuite Consulting, and she has over 2 decades being a CFO and COO experience. And I know that she's going to introduce herself in a little bit as well. When we also have Danielle Fall, who is part of Hash Directors out of the Cayman, and she's also the founder of the Women in Blockchain, which is always wonderful to see. And then we have Marcos Daly, who is the Chief Technology Officer and involved with Loot 8, and he actually has a tremendous background being in Web3 and traditional businesses. He is definitely a content creator and an executive extreme. And we have Saranga Alan Kakai, who is in Kenya, again, working with the laws within our the Kenya blockchain area. We also have Kristen Ragusan, who is the Senior Vice President of Investments and involved with the Bitcoin space and the author of a tremendous book that I'm going to have her share about the end of scarcity. And then we have Larry Cameron, who is the founder of Paradigm Intelligence, and he is heavily involved in working with preventing and the trafficking of children, as well as in cryptocurrency investigations. He has over 20 years of experience in that area. We also have Carlos Miguel Rivas Carrello from El Salvador and the Bitcoin Association, and he is involved with AML, fintech, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and a lot of other business-related areas in El Salvador, which will be very interesting to talk about that whole large sandbox. So we have a large panel here, and we are welcoming everyone. And we also have our professor, Awesome Bandari from India. And we are so excited to have you on. You are an expert in the legal field, and also from the perspective of what's going on in India. You know, the evolution of cryptocurrency in that space definitely is also something to take note. So Amber, welcome. You are the moderator today. We have a rich panel of individuals who are going to be talking about their experiences, and I'm going to let you kick it off.
You're on mute.
So sorry about that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I will repeat myself. Super excited for this group of guests. As Jackie mentioned, I'm Amber Welch. I will let everybody else introduce themselves. Just a quick, brief background about me. As mentioned, I've been in fintech for over 20 years. I double majored in comp sci and accounting finance, and have held 3 different C-suite positions across numerous companies, having worked with over 300 Web3 companies in the last 2 years. I'm now co-founder of FinSuite Inc., where we're not only servicing the Web3 industry, but we are also building an AI product. Danielle, do you want to give a quick intro beyond what was already given?
Yeah, so my day job is basically being an independent director on crypto digital asset structures, sitting on a variety of mutual funds or hedge funds, foundation companies, which is a wrapper for the DAO here in the Cayman Islands, as well as just standalone exchanges or any other crypto type of entity. We really we deal as advisors for our clients, sitting as independent directors based in the Cayman Islands, bringing forth our specialized knowledge in digital assets, as well as finance and the requirements, the legal requirements here in Cayman Islands as well.
Wonderful. Marcus, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure, just real quick. About 30 years in technology, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, patents in blockchain technology, quantum technology, AI. Good history on Wall Street, been CTO for a Fortune 500 company there multiple times, and also for small startups and mid-sized companies. So like Jackie said, all over the place, but all of it, you know, in industry, you know, trying to make things work, which gives me a unique perspective. So it's nice to meet everybody.
And we'll just keep moving right along across the screen. I assume everybody's is in the same order as mine. So Professor, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Good morning to all, and it's my privilege to join the Blockchain Legal Institute Legal Summit. Thank you, Jackie, for inviting me to this distinguished panel. I am Professor Dr. M.K. Bandari from India, with 46 plus years of experience in teaching, researching, consulting, and administration of the 4 leading universities in India. I have set up a global academy of law tech education, wherein we have a team of 120 members. Jackie is also our member, and we have a memorandum of understanding with BLI. We have 12 memorandum of understanding, 6 with Indian universities and 6 with overseas universities and institutions like GBA and many other. So through these members and institutions, we conduct programs, courses online, offline. We conduct various events with the interplay of emerging technologies such as blockchain, metaverse, Web3, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data privacy, and their interplay with the law. Because ultimately we believe that every human activity has to be regulated through proper regulatory framework. And there need to be a strong policy framework for the safer use of the technology. So with that object in mind, we are conducting various programs, and we have close to 120 members from across the world, uh, representing different discipline and domain. So it is my pleasure to be a part of this distinguished panel. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you, Jackie and Amber. It's so nice to be here with everybody. I've been in the finance world and in wealth management for over 30 years. So my background is Wall Street investment, all of that good stuff, and monetary reform. So I've been a student of monetary reform for about 15 years and ran into the Bitcoin white paper on the internet in 2009, and focusing right now on creating proper and legitimate self-issued credit, so that really freedom can be the anchor of society, and that all producers with real demand for their products will have access to supply, and that should be the core fabric of society. So that's where my core focus is.
Wow. Let's keep rolling. Larry, you're next.
Hey everyone, I'm Larry Cameron. I'm a founder of Paradigm Intelligence Limited. What we do is we train law enforcement, created some content for the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces. I'm a trainer for Interpol. Also last year I was a professor at a college in Ontario here. This year I'm writing a book. My background is mainly data center, cybersecurity. Currently we do quite a bit of open source intelligence, digital forensics, blockchain forensics. I also created an event called the Dark Webathon. You can kind of view that if you do hashtag Dark Webathon on LinkedIn, you'll see some cool graphs. We trace the funds for child abuse material. So that's one of our main focuses, is child protection.
Carlos, do you want to do a quick intro of yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the organizers, Jackie, Matt, and happy to meet all the rest of the members of the panel. Well, I've been working since 2017 with fintech in El Salvador in the Central America region. Advising previously, I work in traditional M&A, corporate legal world. Okay, but then I kind of made this shift, and I've been working in the tech industry since then, advising mostly startups and technology companies. I had the opportunity to set up with other visionaries, if we can put it like that, the FinTech Association of El Salvador in 2018. That's how I find out about Bitcoin and blockchain, etc. I set up the first Bitcoin-only company in El Salvador in 2020, where there was no regulation or something about it. Okay, then this company and basically managed to won this project for El Salvador to develop the wallet and all the Bitcoin ecosystem of the country. I had the opportunity to lead that process from the legal point of view. Was a multi-million-dollar project. All this information is public. Okay, so was quite an experience. Then of course there was created this digital asset regulation in El Salvador, and it has been a crazy ride working with all these worldwide companies that are wanting to know more about the country. And basically the last relevant step was creating the Bitcoin Association in El Salvador, that they invite me to be as in the board and as a founding board member. So that's the things I'm involved at the moment.
Well, and then we don't want to forget our last guest on the panel, Kakai, who hopefully I said your name correctly, but I always like to just verify that I didn't butcher anyone's name. If you would like to introduce yourself, and we will kick off with questions right after. And I don't know if he can hear me, so I am going to go ahead with questions. And then if he does kick in, we can always do an intro afterwards. So today we are going to be discussing DeFi and the transformation of financial services. And so our first question is really going to go towards, let's start with Danielle. Given the Cayman Islands' prominent role as a global financial hub, how do you see the future of financial services evolving in the region, particularly in respect to the regulatory changes, the technological advancements, and of course, the global push towards sustainability and transparency?
Thanks, Amber. We had the benefit of having you down about, when was it, at the end of last year, and ever since we've been searching for another opportunity. You come to this island once and you want to live here forever. I have to say, for a very small island, I think we are moving the needle quite a bit when it does come to DeFi and, transitioning to a new financial system. We've always been a leading offshore jurisdiction, where offshore companies that want to incorporate offshore or has that structure in mind will need to come. And then we've always been accepting of alternative asset classes. And, digital asset is absolutely no different than, what was it, 20-something years ago when we started the mutual funds and created the Mutual Funds Act and started onboarding mutual funds here in the Cayman Islands. So we're seeing the same trend, a similar trend as we have seen previously. So the Cayman Islands has what's called the Virtual Asset Service Provider Act. It came into effect in October 2022, I believe, and that was phase one, where all the companies had the opportunity to register as a virtual asset service provider here, ensuring that they have a framework of reference when it comes to doing business in digital assets, which gave them, peace of mind and some comfort incorporating here in the Cayman Islands. We are currently busy with phase two. And CIMA, our monetary authority here, has now opened up the act for consultation and commentary from the community. And this is the first time we're seeing the commentary being accepted on GitHub, which is absolutely phenomenal to see, especially from a small government in a small country like ours. Our government is very forward-thinking, and they're embracing the technology and the nuances in the digital asset, industry in that way. So at the moment, I'm also involved as steering committee member of Blockchain Association of the Cayman Islands. We are holding roundtables, getting community involved, and giving everybody in the community that operates in digital asset input into developments in the law. And then, the regulator and the government will run with that and make adjustments as they seem appropriate. We also have a structure called a foundation company structure, which is very popular these days. Now, that is really used as an offshore DAO structure. We've seen a significant influx in those being incorporated within Cayman Islands. A lot of those people want to come offshore for different reasons, and having that legal backing and that security for their token holders and any service providers rendering services for the DAO. So we've seen a significant growth in that as well in the last couple of years. Then, Cayman Islands have been operating for quite some time. We have very, very high quality service providers, I would say. They've seen everything in the industry at this point. I mean, as an independent director, we've seen hacks of bridges, we've seen liquidation of tokenized funds, we've seen things go wrong. And we know what to look out for, and so does the other service providers in Cayman Islands as well. We have legal teams that's been dealing with this for years and auditors that's been dealing with this for years. So I think the quality of service provider here is phenomenal, specifically in the DeFi and digital asset space. And then lastly, it's just a phenomenal industry and place to deal with. We understand the quick turnaround times that this industry, requires. And when it comes to something like, thinking forward with ESG and thinking forward with, having everything open there on the blockchain, this is something we're really pushing. We can see all the transactions on the blockchain. Cayman Islands has also been taken off the grey list recently for KYC purposes. Just saying, we're open for business. We're abiding by the laws and regulations, even going a step further than necessarily required in some of the other jurisdictions. We're open for business for crypto, and we welcome everybody in. And as an independent director on those structures, I would definitely welcome you in on behalf of Bucky and the entire community here.
I think
So
you
what
made go ahead, Jackie. So sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, I think we both have the same idea. What I think is very interesting here is you're kicking off the finance DeFi panel with a commentary about the island sandbox. And from that perspective, I think it's going to be interesting to hear what everyone else is also going to be sharing from their experience, because the Caymans is definitely a role model and leading the way in a lot of different areas. Amber, who did you want to talk about next from their experiences in this community? Because we have a variety of viewpoints here.
Yeah, the next question I wanted to actually dive into is more in relation to Africa. So I want to throw this one to, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Is it Kakai? Am I saying it correctly? Because I feel like I might not be. Okay.
Yeah, you're saying it correctly.
Well, I will let you introduce yourself first, since we missed that initially. And then I would love for you to answer the question related to regulation considerations. And what I mean by that is, what regulatory considerations are really imperative for safe integration of DeFi services into the mainstream financial landscape? And further, how do you see this impacting countries within Africa and even other continents?
Yeah, awesome. So by way of introduction, my name is Kakai. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, but I'm also currently in London for the Digital Asset Summit. So yeah, my background is in law. I'm a lawyer by profession and attorney in Kenya, but I'm also the director for legal and policy and regulatory affairs at the Blockchain Association of Kenya. Based on that, I was the lead in drafting the Kenyan Virtual Asset Service Providers Bill, and I'm also working on a virtual asset tax reforms for Kenya and virtual asset ML and CTF policies. Now, to the question on what regulatory considerations are imperative in terms of DeFi regulation, I would answer that question by, given that I've interacted both with the private sector and the government, some of these regulatory considerations, government usually more biased towards some considerations, while private sector usually biased towards some considerations. So for instance, I will start with the regulatory considerations for DeFi products or other founders. A lot of founders have interacted with in the DeFi sector in terms of exploring regulatory consideration and metrics for them setting up in a jurisdiction is consistency in as far as laws and regulations are concerned. By this, I mean, we understand we're in the tech space. Countries are borderless. If somebody deployed a product, or they want to launch a product across 5-10 jurisdictions. I mean, companies like Binance, for instance, are operating across 18 jurisdictions. And various other companies, for instance, in Africa, are operating across 5 jurisdictions. So based on my interaction with some of these clients, usually their primary consideration, and even when we were drafting the bill, is laws and regulations that seamlessly, that are interpretable or communicate to other jurisdictions. By this, I mean, if somebody is, for instance, licensed in Cayman Islands, and they would want to come to Africa, they would look for regulations that makes the compliance burden less heavy on them. That means if they came to Kenya, the first question would be, if I got a Kenyan license, how easy will it be for me to get a Ugandan, Tanzanian, and a South Africa license? So from a business perspective, a lot of businesses look at, consider how easy it is for them in terms of a compliance burden for them to have one product and have the product easily operate across several jurisdictions, because all these jurisdictions have more or less basic similarity in how regulations look like. Even that is why when we were drafting the VASP in Kenya, the Virtual Asset Service Providers Bill in Kenya, we looked at Cayman Islands, we looked at Bermuda, we looked at Mauritius, South Africa, Singapore. The goal for that was just to make sure that we are more or less on the same page in as far as the regulatory clarity is concerned. So with that being said, the primary thing a lot of startups look for is consistency. Now that is on the startup end. On the government end, considerations are usually heavier and more tougher on businesses. Number one, governments look at very strong consumer protection frameworks. Because, I mean, for instance, government want to protect their consumers, particularly and especially retail consumers. Governments want to be in a situation where they avoid another FTX collapse, they avoid another Terra Luna collapse, or all these rug pulls that happen. So one primary regulation consideration, and this cuts across a lot of vast regulation, is consumer protection, especially and particularly for centralized entities. Number two, AML and CTF. I mean, anti-money laundering is a very huge consideration, especially when conversations around virtual assets and cryptocurrencies come into the picture. We've just recently seen Binance being fined about $4 billion by the US government based on AML, CTF concerns. They're still receiving the same hit in Nigeria. Nigeria government is also doing a crackdown on Binance, and they have actually just received a court order for them to disclose top 100 of the trades they do. Equally, Kenya is also trying to be very keen on ML and CTF considerations. South Africa as well, and a lot of African countries. So to that extent, I think ML, CTF is one key regulatory consideration. Then another key interesting regulatory consideration I've seen is tax. So in as much as a lot of governments are very heavy against virtual assets and crypto assets, to some extent, they still end up also creating tax laws around virtual assets. We've seen that in Kenya, where they introduced the digital asset tax, and a few other jurisdictions. So one key regulatory consideration I can also say from that end is government looking at this industry as the DeFi and Web3 industry as an opportunity for revenue generation. So to summarize that from a government perspective is number one, consumer protection. Number two, ML CTF. Number three, tax considerations. That is from the government end. From a private sector end, what I've seen, number one is consistency, and number two, also favorable tax regimes. Yeah.
So I think like that really brings up a valid point that's kind of like an overarching umbrella that I've seen working with so many of these companies. And that is most, if not the vast majority of startups working in Web3 really do want to be compliant. They want to follow regulation. They want to have that guidance. They just don't know where to start a lot of times. And so from my experience, and I'm sure most, if not all of you would agree, we're not seeing companies that are attempting to be criminals or attempting to skirt these regulatory issues. So that kind of takes me to my next question. And this one's going to be towards Larry. Larry, in the face of financial crime, what protocols should we have established within the DeFi community to maintain integrity so that we trust the system?
One of the main problems today is that most of the DeFi systems are not compliant. So in order to gain trust, you need the regulatory compliance measures. I know it's decentralized, but there must be KYC. You should have anti-money laundering. You should be able to adhere to sanctions. I mean, if you're facilitating or doing transactions that are involved with sanctioned entities, then the owner of that decentralized entity or the developers could get, certain law enforcement repercussions or regulatory SEC, IRSCI. They could get fined, etc. There was some that went to jail. Another one is, it's more with the software, like the smart contract audits. Notice that a lot of them, they don't update them and they don't continuously identify those vulnerabilities and exploits, which can, there's a lot of hacks that went on recently. Transparency, open source. You want to build trust with it. Making the code open source would allow you to, gain a community. You can scrutinize the code, fix some vulnerabilities. Also, the governance. I find it's lacking governance. There was like if you had decentralized, like a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, where decisions can be collectively made by the token holders. That would be another way. Insurance, I noticed none of them have insurance. Some of the exchanges, if you get hacked, then, they would have either funds set aside to take care of it, or they would have insurance. And a lot of these decentralized organizations don't have that. You need continuous monitoring. You need to make sure that these transactions going through these decentralized entities are not involved in any financial crime. A lot of the ones I'm looking into some cases now, and it's a lot of hacks, it's a lot of scams, pig butchering, where even the people doing the scams are being trafficked. There's a lot of problems right now with cryptocurrency and how you can just send it to anybody globally. There's also mixers, washers, tumblers. There's the swapping, where you can swap for one currency to another, so obfuscate the flow of the funds. You should have privacy in blockchain. If you send $5 to someone and they they see how much you have $1 million, you could then become a target. So I'm all for privacy, but you should have a way where you can identify them through KYC, just in case there is a crime. Bug bounties, security initiatives, you should have those. Just continuous improvement of that, the security of that entity. Also, you need to do a lot of education and awareness. Some of the kids, they get scammed, younger and older, and even any age. You're vulnerable to people trying to scam you, people trying to hack you in the exchange. So you need to kind of bring up the next generation of education, where everyone's cyber secure. They know what not to do with their private keys.
What I love, Larry, that you were talking about is the both, you were talking about the positive as well as maybe the not so positive within our community, but a lot of what you were talking about also, I know from the last panel, we were talking about the laws and compliance regulations that are put into place, but there's many layers here. So I know that you work in a space where you're seeing a lot of the not so good side. I'm curious, Amber, which question do you want to ask next? Because we have such a variety of viewpoints on this panel. Who did you want to talk to next? Thank you, Larry, so much for everything that you're sharing. Those are areas that we definitely have to protect.
Yeah, I want to jump to Kristen next, because you have a whole lot going on, obviously. And I'm curious about your perspective with traditional businesses and their adaptation and integration with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies into their normal operations and their financial strategies. So what do you believe are the most significant challenges that you're seeing these traditional businesses face? And what kind of opportunities do you think they face in this changing landscape that we're all seeing?
So tremendous opportunity and also significant challenges. And I think sort of one of the most amazing things to stop and pause is that even though we're at this precipice of incredible change, this is actually nothing new. So the backbone of human history is challenging the money systems, always. In fact, all of human history is really about challenging centralized money forces versus decentralized, the producers maintaining the power and defining that. And the problem has been is that we have not been able to prove that the technology of money is legitimate past a certain amount of scope, or to have it go into different communities. So we really are the first people in human history with blockchain who can have a sustaining difference that will equalize this playing field and change the landscape of the planet dramatically. So, we can look at this even as, whether it's any country, but the founding fathers came here because they were in debt and they started to self-issue their own credit, but the British took it away because, again, it was a little bit in the possibility of too much freedom. So businesses in terms of just regular cryptocurrency, using DeFi, using blockchain, there are many different avenues where this is coming through. And the adoption is gradual right now. It looks gradual to us, but it will be gradual until it's sudden and explosive. So, much like a forest fire, it's all brewing and happening underneath the ground. If people aren't paying attention, they wouldn't notice it's happening. And then suddenly it's going to be very much mainstream. Obviously, what's been in the news this year are the financial firms taking on the Bitcoin ETF, possibly the Ether ETF coming, which is really probably the biggest, stake through the castle door in terms of change and bringing those two worlds together. And obviously, you have regulatory issues there. And for the firms themselves, they have fiduciary responsibilities that are stated and unstated to their client bases. They have a lack of education, perhaps, as to exactly how these instruments work or what they are. And they are grappling in terms of what parameters they're going to put. Their advisors, their sales force also don't necessarily understand. So you've got an education gap, a regulatory gap. These things, though, quickly get resolved and they get pushed along as the market makes these instruments more valuable, as those in the know understand why Bitcoin is so significant. And the more that the price appreciates, whether it's against the traditional fiat currencies and all the other destabilization we're seeing in the world, everybody again will get pushed that much further and faster for adoption. So I think these things will close the gap between education, regulatory, price volatility. Markets will drive that. People will catch up faster up to speed, and it's certainly not going away. And then that will open the floodgate of all the other innovation, which I think DeFi is probably the most important.
I think that you pointed on something really significant that a lot of people don't realize. And I saw this firsthand this last fall. I attended a conference that was a culmination of the Fortune 500 here in the US. And every single CFO that I met there at every major corporation out of the US, they're all doing proof of concepts in-house. So you hit the nail on the head when you said the public doesn't necessarily realize it, but it is actually occurring. And when it goes live, it will go live in a big way. So there are more regions that I want to dive into, kind of regional questions. But before we do that, I think like the question that we just talked about with you lends itself really nicely to the one that I want to touch on with Marcus. And that's because there is a convergence happening between AI and blockchain. Those of us in this ecosystem have seen it. A lot of people outside have seen it. And so I want to know how you anticipate this integration influencing the current bull run that we are expecting to really see be kicking in as we're already seeing it ramp up, and how you think it's going to propel like the key advancements within both fields in the near future. And then I do have a follow-up question to that, but I want to hear this answer first.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, other than the AI meme coins that certainly seem to be, having an impact, which is always fun to watch. I do think that there's a lot of things happening inside of the blockchain space in terms of the technology and on the outside. And actually, I was just thinking about what Larry was talking about in terms of some of the challenges. One of the things that has been a struggle in the blockchain space has been the lack of tools that are typically available to developers to be able to develop secure code, to be able to develop in a manner that actually eliminates some portion of the issues that he was highlighting. A big part of the reason why we don't see those tools is not because people don't want to develop them, it's because of the uncertainty about whether or not the market is going to be there to be able to sell those tools. And I'm hoping that in the absence of having those tools, also with some improved regulatory clarity, that AI will begin to fill that space. A lot of the developers I already work with today, they're actually using AI to write the code. And in fact, I expect to see, over the course of the next 12 months, everybody can be a programmer who has ChatGPT, right? Which then, of course, introduces some other security risks. But there is that. And I do think that we'll see a proliferation of interesting ideas from people that otherwise may have not decided to try it, but because now they have access to the right tooling, at least to be able to create, that they'll start to create things and you'll see some explosion there. I also think that you'll see, hopefully, real use of AI on the blockchain. Today, like I said, there's a lot of meme coins, but one of the things that you don't see today are a lot of people investing in OpenAI or investing in, we'll say, Meta or Anthropic. And the reason for that is that stock is too expensive. It's something that they don't really quite understand. One of the things that's great about blockchain is that there is the opportunity to bring these types of bleeding edge technologies like AI to others who otherwise wouldn't be able to invest in them, now have access to a way to invest, right? Investing either their time, their money. The challenge has been, of course, tokenizing models and tokenizing some of the technology there, but even that's becoming possible. So I do expect, both on the outside in terms of, development and security and bringing in the right tools, but then on the inside in terms of what gets put on the blockchain, we'll start to see these things emerge in a manner that's going to be hopefully leading to what Kristen was talking about around, there's kind of the fire under the brush there, but then through AI, you'll see this, at least an exponential, if not parabolic growth of what happens in this space.
What do you think the impact with AI is going to be on the traditional banking institution?
Yeah, good question. I was actually on a call today with a hedge fund. Their use of AI was interesting. There's actually a agent framework that we created at a company that I'm technical co-founder of called Neurometrics. There's at the beginning of this week, there was a bunch of, actually it was the beginning of last week, there were several announcements that came out about these agents, these AI agents that can basically do whatever their persona is defined to do. And one of those, of course, is develop code. One of those that was very well known was Devon. If you Google Devon, you'll see this big announcement about Devon. It was they did a great job with their marketing. What I'm expecting to see in the traditional banking space is, kind of to some of the points that were made here, the knowledge is only typically held by a few at this point. It still has not quite permeated. So you'll see people acting as advisors that are AIs. You'll see a lot of these hedge funds, even just regular traditional funds, using AI to pick the right investments, monitor them, to make decisions, and do that autonomously, right? And be able to do it autonomously in a way that, though, still is compliant. In fact, you can produce the right kind of records to demonstrate that compliance was in fact followed, and produce the records that are necessary to then be able to do the follow-on reporting that's necessary later on. So I imagine that a lot of what we do with the blockchain investments, and well beyond even the financial side of it, is going to be done with AI. And hopefully we'll know that there are AI agents, but I don't think we're going to mind. In fact, we may even prefer them in many cases. So that's where I see it going.
So I'd like to add to that. It's true, this is coming, and firms are very much interested in it because of cost cutting, and also the incredible tedium and expanse of compliance paperwork, right? The challenge with this is how that AI is programmed, and AI will be become the compliance officer, which could be absolutely draconian and could frustrate the market so extraordinarily that you get a singular point and you're actually even not able to have tailor-made portfolios and these kinds of things. The other thing that could truly come is that AI will determine who's creditworthy and for how much. And you could have tremendous bias built in that. And again, we would have a step further away from industrial capitalism or investment capitalism, which I argue we've basically lost today because we're not creating debt for productive entrepreneurialism. We're creating debt for mortgages and college tuition. And that's pretty much it besides credit cards. So you get this cannibalistic form of creating money through debt. And so AI would have to carefully be monitored. Who would be the free market? Do we destroy entrepreneurs in this? And when it comes down to the financial markets, a lot of those people are the backbone of what's left of investment capitalism funding all the different small business owners.
Yeah,
I think there's
so much there.
I think there's a really interesting aspect of this too, where we've seen all of these spaces have a lot of regulation and a lot of compliance and oversight in their sectors, their individual sectors. But like VCs in certain areas of funding small businesses don't necessarily have that level. A lot of it's emotionally based, and so I think it's. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just add one rider? As we are moving toward the advanced technologies like AI and blockchain, machine learning, quantum computing, and so on, the list is very long. I think the biggest challenge before all the countries, all the jurisdiction is to ensure a cyber resilient and strong cyber security framework. And second thing to my mind is, as we are sharing vast amount of data, because all these technologies are data-driven technology. So the privacy and integrity of data and privacy of individuals is again a very important challenge for all of us, and especially for the governance to regulate that how we can make a safer use of technologies. That's just by way of some addition. Okay.
I think
Thank
that's a really important addition to add. Thank you for chiming in there. I'm going to jump over to Carlos, and then I do have another question actually for Professor Badhari. So Carlos, before we jump into the other question, I want to ask you about El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin. LATAM as a whole region has been very accepting of blockchain. El Salvador has really led the charge with their acceptance of Bitcoin and blockchain technology and use just throughout. And so I'm curious about that influence within all of South America and the countries in that region. What you think that economic impact has been, the regulatory adoption, and just like how accepting of it is the public?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, in South America, there was already an industry related to cryptocurrencies in development since many years. There have been built relevant exchanges that have been acquired by bigger companies, etc. But here in Central America, there was not a big presence of the industry, but due to some laws that were created in 2021 and 2022. Basically, there was this possibility to basically run Bitcoin-based business, okay? And then also entities that deal explicitly with digital assets, okay, with their particular tax benefits. For example, Bitcoin companies have already accepted on capital gains, but if you decide to work on purely digital assets, that is not Bitcoin. Okay, it's according to how the regulation was drafted. Digital asset is all else that is not Bitcoin. You have a wide range of tax exemption. It doesn't matter if you are working on an issuance of a token, or basically you are providing digital assets, stable coins, etc. You have a complete tax exemption on different taxes. Okay, so that's make very interesting to different companies come in and set up here their headquarters. About like other countries, specifically in Central American region, wanted to. It's really hard that all the circumstances align and they could basically set up as a legal tender of Bitcoin. Okay, but at least issuing some guidelines that Central Reserve Bank or banking supervising authorities issuing some guidelines or basically allowing them to explicitly do business with digital assets. We are not seeing that at the moment. Okay, I have seen neighboring countries issuing explicit memorandums about this is not a legal tender. There is no authorization related to developing business with digital assets, etc. So that basically at the moment shift the view of the investors to El Salvador. Okay, and there is also a set of other regulations that make appealing this jurisdiction. Sadly, we are not as developed as a Cayman Island on the banking sector yet, working with digital assets. Cayman is always like being the spearheading the way on this, but yeah, it's a goal at least to the industry, to the regulators, to be more open on the banking side. Okay, because
I think you bring up a really good point that how it's occurring in El Salvador isn't necessarily how everyone's seeing it occur in all of LATAM and the South American region. Because I know countries like Venezuela who have hyperinflation have been much more open arms about things. And I'm sure that's creating a little bit of contention between some of the countries and how they recognize cryptocurrency. That actually leads me to my final individual question, which is for Professor. So, Professor Bidhari, I would like to understand from you a better way of how India is recognizing cryptocurrency.
Thank you, Amber. It's a really very vital question in terms of the global acceptance or global response to the cryptocurrency. See, I represent the country which is the largest country in terms of the population and which is a democratic country, democratically governed the country. Why I am telling is that in a country of this magnitude, to have a uniform and single regulatory framework for regulating cryptocurrencies is a challenging task. India, no doubt, is at the cusp of digital revolution, and we are now emerging as a potential leader in terms of the digital economy and digital adoption of the technology. Let me briefly mention that blockchain is not about cryptocurrency alone. There are many use cases. Blockchain as digital ledger technology has many use cases, and India is taking advantage and exploiting all the possible opportunities through national strategy for blockchain and national blockchain framework, a dedicated platform by using the blockchain technology in the governance. So how we can bring a transparent, effective, and seamless governance by using various blockchain platforms. So in that regard, I'm sure that India is doing pretty well, and we are adopting blockchain in a massive scale, both in terms of public-private partnership. Even, as you know, we are the largest democracy, and now we are conducting elections. Next month, we will have a parliamentary elections. So our Election Commission of India is planning to conduct election using blockchain technology. The identity cards, what we call voter cards, they may be put on blockchain technology, so they cannot be tampered, or they cannot be hacked, or they cannot be duplicated. Having said that, now coming to your question about regulating their cryptocurrencies, let me say you that we are moving from hostility toward neutrality. in initial years of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency evolution, India was hostile. Indian Federal Bank, the Reserve Bank of India, was not ready, and still it is reluctant to accept cryptocurrency as a legal tender or as a currency per se. So we don't recognize it as a currency. And the dilemma is that still we are not clear whether it is a security or it is a asset or it is a goods, in what category we need to classify so that accordingly we can regulate. But now gradually we have adopted a neutral approach. It is neither prohibited nor permitted. So after 2020 Supreme Court judgment, Supreme Court is the apex court of the country, wherein the Supreme Court allowed crypto exchanges to deal with cryptocurrencies with certain KYC requirements and certain conditions. The atmosphere for cryptocurrency investment, trade has grown up. But still, I would say we don't have a clear, dedicated law which can regulate the cryptocurrencies, or as we call them, virtual digital assets, VDAs. But certainly we have a series of laws, existing laws, where we have recognized virtual digital assets, and we have made provisions for proper reporting. I may give you one example. One is the Companies Act, which regulates the corporate sector. It has made a provision to report all transactions done via virtual digital currencies. So what it has done is, it has recognized that yes, the transactions can be done via virtual digital assets. Similarly, the PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which is similar to several countries, we have a stringent provision that if the digital assets are not properly transacted as per the requirement of the PMLA, then stringent punishment will be there.
I'm going to interrupt there because you made a really, really fantastic point about, and this has been said by a few individuals, and I think it's worth kind of repeating for everybody, the fact that adoption has been facing some resistance, but there is some form of it in just about every region. And I recently read in an article, and I don't remember where, but around 80% of all countries have some form of either regulation or compliance or something touching on digital assets in their space. So I want to take it back before we close this panel to kind of a basic question.
Can you allow me a minute, please? Can you allow me a minute to sum up?
Yes, just a minute of summary. Just a minute of summary.
Yeah. Just a minute. 60 seconds. Okay. So we have an Income Tax Act, which has now imposed in 2023 30% tax on digital asset transactions. So that means that yes, digital asset transactions are permissible. Now, when India was a president of G20 nation last year, our Prime Minister and our Finance Minister, Law Minister, on various fora of G20 have strongly advocated that these kinds of instruments must be regulated via global consensus. We need a global consensus for a regulatory framework which is convenient and which is acceptable to all the countries. Silos will not work. Thank you.
I think that based on what you just shared, that is actually, and I really don't want to end our panel discussion because we've only, as I've mentioned before, touched the surface. But Professor, what you just shared is true. There needs to be a global consensus because how every country is doing this is important because we're all individual, but there has to be a definition that can be across the board because digital assets and businesses are global. And we're not just now operating in individual countries anymore. So I really, Amber, I'm going to let you have the last 60 seconds before we wrap up, because we have a phenomenal EndNote speaker who is coming. And I definitely want to thank everyone. And as I've mentioned before, everyone's contact information will be in the blog below. And everyone who you've seen on our panels, we do have more talk shows that we've done for Blockchain and Legal Institute, so you're able to actually listen to their full stories. But Amber, why don't you go ahead and wrap up for our panel today?
Yes, thank you. I know we didn't even get to scrape the surface related to DeFi. We had some great questions from the audience on some basics even of cryptocurrency. So the way I would like to close out this panel is just to recommend that anybody listening, no matter what your level is, that you continue to seek out and be inquisitive. If you're a beginner learner and you're trying to understand what a block and blockchain technology is, there's fantastic free resources. There's books such as the Bitcoin Standard. You can find a plethora of information there. Of course, Blockchain Legal Institute has a nearly unlimited amount of information that will help guide you. And then just to kind of close out this panel, I want to say thank you to all of our guests and encourage anybody that is listening to feel free to reach out and get in touch with all of us. Everybody here is an expert in their area. They have years and years of experience. And from my personal experience, and I'm sure everyone here can back this up, this community truly is that. It is one of a community where everyone wants to help other people learn and grow. And so don't hesitate. Don't ever think that a question is not worth asking. It always is. Everyone here and beyond would be more than happy to help you grow your knowledge. Thank you, Jackie and Matt, for having us. And I'm going to pass it over to you guys to close out this panel.
I'll throw some remarks in here real quick. First off, the biggest thanks to everyone, and definitely you, Amber, for being an incredible moderator. I heard some inspirational things here. Maybe my takeaway is that a lot of these financial incumbents, Kakai is over there in London. If there was ever a financial incumbent, it might be the folks there. But I feel that there's some, there's some headwinds, and there's a lot of innovation going on now where jurisdictions like Kenya are creating models and adapting the things that are going on in the world, like DeFi, maybe faster than the incumbents. I don't know if that's fair to say. Our friends in the Cayman Islands also have, new, well, they've always been a leader, right? Now there's leaders kind of stepping up everywhere. And I think that DeFi is a big part of that. And so I'm happy to have, been able to absorb all the thoughts here. Those are my thoughts. And then Jackie, let's hear from you. And then we got our wrap up and we can get everybody out of here.
And we, this is our second summit. We started with real world assets. We went to blockchain law. We're now talking about finance, from the perspective of Bitcoin, from the perspective of AI, legacy, DeFi. I mean, this is a rich, deep space, and we all have an obligation to mentor others. And I think that that's exactly what Amber has shared. And we also have an obligation to think about the individuals. That's why DeFi was created. It's all about making sure that we all have the economic freedoms that we want. So everyone who is on, I know we only touched the surface, but thank you so much for planting the seeds. And I know we'll have further conversations. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. And now we're on to our EndNote. So we're So our EndNote speaker, I met through the GBBC. Dale Christie is a business fellow. He's a blockchain strategist at FedEx. He's the chairman of the BIDA Standards Council. He is an experienced supply chain executive, and he's a philosopher. And he has always inspired me every time I've spoken with him, because he is a forward thinker, a futurist in terms of where the problem is and how to solve it. And Dale, thank you so much for being our EndNote. You have a job now of summarizing the last 3 hours that I think only you could do. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've never been preceded by a cruise commercial before, but now I can check that one off the list.
Jackie was responsible for that one. Jackie's a big
Yeah,
cruiser. Yeah, very happy to have you here, Dale, and thank you for listening on. And you know, we look for you for the keynote or for the end note here with inspiration and your comments.
Well, you flatter me, and I'm humbled by that. And Jackie and Matt, thank you obviously for the opportunity to join this event today. I'm going to do my best to offer closing comments, I guess, and connect what was covered today with my own experience and perspective in this area. The challenge is I'm not a lawyer and I'm not in the DeFi or finance space. So, but I think I've done this long enough to hopefully connect a few dots. I obviously have great respect for the esteemed moderators and panelists today. I learned a lot of expertise. So I applaud all the people I've been listening to and have been trying to take great notes to some of this stuff. As the blockchain and Web3 lead for FedEx, my focus is in the enterprise space. And I also happen to work for a company that goes to 220 countries and territories. So my default position is really the International Space Station. So I'm going to take you up there for just a second, if you would. At that level, there is no FedEx, there is no industry, and there are no borders. And data knows no geographic borders. So that has also led me to a very, very broad perspective on things like open protocols and standards and interoperability, some of the things we've been talking about today. And again, in the global commerce space, we think it's going to take a pro-competitive global village, or what I refer to as a co-opetition, to scale blockchain and Web3 technologies. I would also say that the future of global commerce is paperless. So that tells you that all of us that we've been talking about today on these digital platforms and digital first focus is going to come true. And now I think we've really kind of connected what I do and what was discussed today, which is that kind of shared digital first future. When global commerce becomes digital, it will have a broad impact on traditional middleman processes that sit between supply and demand for a price. And we haven't really talked about the peer-to-peer aspects of this technology today, but certainly it speaks to that. So bear with me for a moment, if you would, and I'm going to do my best to connect a couple of dots. For all of human time, going back literally thousands of years, we have created what I would refer to as a proxy for trust, starting with clay tablets, wooden carvings, papyrus, finally, and still currently, paper. For movement from point A to point B, we had to do something, and technology has never allowed us to do that until these current times. Today, we're literally at the point where we can envision a truly paperless global commerce. So rather than a global supply chain we all experienced during the pandemic, where we couldn't get typical things we were used to seeing on the store shelf, when we get to the point where these items are digitized and then the processes are digitalized, Jackie can then become a trusted shipper with US Customs. And when she ships something from outside the US into the country, the key data elements can move at the speed of data and not the physical movement as we've always known. That can essentially do away with the concept of a port of entry or clearing customs, because that will just be one of the processes that is digitized by US Customs, including digital identity, which I'm going to come back to in just a minute. That came up in one of the panels. The takeaway from those comments is that it connects us to digital frameworks and to digital identity. Again, we'll come back to that. And to get to that point, we have to have standards and interoperability. I think that's a common discussion from many of today's panelists. I think it also speaks to the need for these common components to scale these technologies, to include the legal side of things with regulations, with compliance, et cetera, et cetera. So to kind of recap some of the panels real quick, again, we talked all the way from the first panel about real world assets. We talked about a lack of knowledge and understanding about blockchain. I think that we've all struggled with that. I think we've spent a lot of years, probably maybe not the best use of our resources, trying to explain what blockchain is to people. In fact, I think it's the C-suite, it's the equivalent of the C-suite that are going to scale that. I think we need to speak the language of business, risk, opportunity. We talked in the last panel about fiduciary responsibilities. I think that becomes more and more important as this moves forward. One of the comments that I wrote down early on from the first panel was, let's make dumb money smart. I love that comment. We're trying to tokenize cash. Real world assets can include currency as well. Enrique talked about standardization, and we talked about European regulations that allow us to tokenize things. For example, shares in companies. Digital identity, I told you I'd come back to that. U.S. Customs is actually focused on verifiable credentials on their next iteration of what they call ACE, the automated commercial process that they have, and it will connect to verifiable credentials. So we spent, there were multiple comments about digital identity. So whether that's an entity, verifiable credentials would be things like what we would currently have on licenses or other certifications, or maybe a law degree, whatever the case may be from that point of view. But I spent the first several years focused in this area, and people would ask me, well, that sounds really great. How are you going to get the government to follow that, to do that? And the fact is that U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security in the U.S. are very far down that path, and they're focused on, again, verifiable credentials moving forward. Panel 2, we moved over into blockchain law. We got into compliance and the Bermuda discussion, and DAOs with Cayman Islands and Bermuda. Obviously, we talked about a lot of very forward-thinking, not only representatives on these panels today, but these technologies, to include laws and regulations and oversight transparency. Scott talked about the need for AI and blockchain. Many of these things are being put in place around blockchain, also need to be put in place around AI. I actually believe, and I've been saying this for quite a while, that blockchain, the blockchain could be, the killer use of blockchain essentially could be AI. When we first saw ChatGPT and other aspects of that, the very next comment from most people that care about us said, be careful, Dale, because you don't know what the source of that. And that is true. And certainly we all know that the source the type of technology that could get you to the source is blockchain. And so I actually believe that there is a fantastic alignment there to connect these two. And we'll see whether I'm right or not on that one. But certainly I believe those are going to come together. We talked about Europe. Again, Tatiana talked about the blockchain gold standard, and I think we all get to look at those things as well: environmental sustainability, data protection, digital identity, cybersecurity, interoperability. Again, I've mentioned some of those things already, but again, I would say from our point of view, we have very ruggedized global processes. Again, 220 countries and territories. We go everywhere you can go from that point of view. And yet, we don't think blockchain is going to help us at all in any of those. So, said another way, although blockchain is in Web3 not yet very fast or scalable or mature, we believe where authenticity matters, where provenance matters, where pedigree matters, we think it's going to be transformative. And we think for it to be transformative, it actually has to be bigger than us. And we've said that for 5 years now, that we actually think we have to work together. And I'll come back to that in just a second. Panel 3, we talked about DeFi and finance and how blockchain's influencing current markets. Again, back to payments, DAOs, very forward-thinking efforts in a number of areas there. Larry talked about needing regulatory compliance measures, KYC, et cetera, and transparency. And here we are back to the O word, open source. We took that on in about 2018 maybe, and I remember mentioning the word open to somebody, and FedEx has been an entity that has really done a lot internally, so kind of lock the doors and slide pizza under the door and wait for the puff of smoke to come out, and you'll know they've invented something that never had existed before we put it out to the marketplace. And I used the word open around this, and some people I worked with closely kind of pulled me off to the side and said, Dale, you can't use that word. That's a career ender. We don't do that. And it's like, well, you don't understand. Our CIO thinks we do that, and we believe that that's where this is going to go. So it's been an interesting learning use case behind, again, a Fortune 500. We've had to get to that point as well. And early on, from a legal point of view, the early one was also, hey, wait a second, we don't do that. And little by little, they get it, they understand it, they've moved forward with that. They support the open, they support this pro-competitive, what I refer to as co-opetition, and it has been a fantastic journey, a very collaborative journey with our legal team from that point of view. C-suite. Kristen mentioned fiduciary responsibilities. Again, I want to go back to that for just a second, and then I'll wrap up here in just a moment. I think it's from my point of view. Again, this may not be my audience, but from my point of view, I think it's incumbent upon me and my counterparts to speak the language of business to the C-suite. They're the ones that are actually going to scale this, I believe, and that language is risk and opportunity and fiduciary responsibilities. And we have to be, and I would also say the legal side of things as well. The attorneys, the lawyers also have to be fluent in both paper contracts and smart contracts, and bilingual essentially from that point of view. And I think I know I've wasted a lot of time previously trying to explain how really incredibly cool this technology is, and peer-to-peer and smart contracts and all that kind of stuff. And one of my very favorite references to smart contracts came from one of our attorneys who simply said, smart contracts are neither smart nor are they contracts. So I still love that comment, and I still use that one. And the final comment I want, before I get to my few closing comments, is resistance to adoption. I am a naive and idealistic person. I've spent most of my career on process improvement in big corporations. Okay, we've got a problem here. We've got a customer service pinch point here. How do we do that? And my brain connects dots, and I can kind of go back upstream and go, okay, well, the domino that fell over finally is not the one that caused the problem. It was the one back up here. And you build processes and you work to improve them and you put them in place, and you can see progress. But I didn't realize the level of resistance to adoption. And again, that's the word that was used on panel 3. I refer to that as, the gravitational pull, essentially, of existing processes, and more specifically, Web 2 companies are Web 2 companies. They're not Web 3 companies, and Web 3 companies are not Web 2 companies. And so whether we can get ourselves to the point where we can create some kind of a Web 2.5, something that would help the Web 2 companies get to Web 3, or the Web 3 companies put a step down and help the Web 2 companies get to those places. But there are a lot of people that are doing a lot of things. They're putting their kids through college. They're doing all kinds of things with their current goals and their current MBOs and annual goals and things like that. And they don't necessarily want to drop everything and jump to this new technology. And so that resistance to adoption, I think, is absolutely real. I think we have to, I don't think we should be depressed or dejected by it. I think we just take it for what it is, but it is reality. And so I guess in closing, these are literally world-changing ideas and technologies we've been discussing today. One of the comments I guess I would offer to the audience today is, yes, of course, business cases are critical. However, back up to the International Space Station view for a second, I would also challenge this group to look broadly to standards and their interoperability opportunities, and look to your left, virtually here, look to your left and to your right, and to recognize that these are likely teammates in this global effort. As I said, we realized and stated publicly in 2019 that for this technology to be transformative in our space, which is global commerce, it had to be bigger than FedEx. And I think the point is the same with this audience. And again, that's what I refer to as co-opetition. And my definition of that is, it's not about where we compete, it's about where we can agree. So my challenge to you is, where can we agree on the topics discussed today? And let's get started. And Jackie and Matt, back to you.
Hey, that was great. I had a silly thought, which was, Dale, does the shipping company deliver to Liberland yet? Do we have any ops in Liberland? Is there any demand there?
I don't believe that that's one of the 220, but we can always hope that we get to 221.
I think we want to support that. That's very, very cool. Jackie, give us some closing remarks.
Well, Dale, you definitely rocked this to the moon, so to speak, as you said. And from the perspective of the global perspective, I do think we need to take the bigger picture. And, what you shared about the various pieces, that's the direction that we're all going to be going. We all have to cooperate and look how we're going to work together. And you're right, not every company is going to need blockchain. but we do need to educate, and we need to be aware of what is applicable and what's not applicable. And then how do we protect the consumers, but not in a way that's going to be restrictive of the entrepreneurs and the creative businesses and individuals who are in this space. Again, Dale, I cannot thank you enough for the wisdom that you've shared, and Matt for being a leader in your field as well. I think for everyone who has been listening, stay tuned for the other global summits that we're doing in October. We're going to be talking about sustainability and a lot of the environmental issues and a lot of the social good that the companies are actually doing in our space. You talk about the cruise. We are doing a crypto blockchain DeFi conversation cruise, and we are anticipating it's going to be seen by 15 million eyes. And there's more to come on that. So we are very excited about the future of Blockchain Legal Institute and the education and support that we're providing our community. We invite everyone to join us on this because we are not alone. It has to be collectively a family of educating everyone from the young to the older individuals, because we're all in this together. So Dale, thank you so much. Matt, thank you so much. And for everyone who has been part of this journey, we truly appreciate all the sponsors and everyone who were on the panels today. Cannot thank you enough. And I know we have credits that are going to roll. And thank you to Sarson Funds, American Crypto Academy, and everyone else who's been able to produce this. So thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone around the world.
Thank you.